Okay. Thank you all for joining us this morning. For those of you that weren't here yesterday, my name's Emily Finnegan. I am our facilitator for day 2 of our second advisory committee meeting. Before we get started, I know there was a question yesterday about Wi-Fi. There is free Wi-Fi in the room. Hopefully you all are able to get online. It's DPW Public Access. So if you're here in the room, you should be able to just log on. But please come up to me if you're having any issues connecting. And thank you to our folks online for joining us today. So to get us started, we have some opening remarks from Lead Deputy Director Cindy Messer from the Department of Water Resources.
Thank you. All right, good morning, everyone. And thank you all for being here, day 2, early start. I know yesterday was a really good meeting, a lot of great dialogue. I personally really enjoyed my breakout group. I think we had some really great discussion and lots of good ideas. So this morning, in addition to welcoming everyone and kind of kicking this off, I do also have the honor of offering a land acknowledgement. And so I'd like to offer land acknowledgement and recognition of the original inhabitants of the land we are meeting upon. In doing so, the Department of Water Resources honors the stories, the culture, and a commitment to recognizing the continued presence of the San Gabriel Tongva people, led by the San Gabriel Tongva Tribal Council and the Kizh Nation. On behalf of the department, we continue our commitment to honor tribal sovereignty and our responsibility to healing and reconciliation in the work that we do. We acknowledge the 109 federally recognized tribes in California, and we are deeply honored to work with many of these tribes on a variety of different projects. I also have the honor this morning of recognizing the tribal representatives that have joined us both yesterday and today to take part in the conversation, as well as their participation in our Tribal Advisory Council or group. So I would like to recognize and thank Frank Venegas, who joined us yesterday for our Colorado River panel. Frank, in his capacity as a tribal representative from the Fort Yuma Quechan, hopefully I'm saying that correctly, Indian Reservation. Frank was amazing as part of our panel yesterday. I'm not sure I saw him yet this morning, but I do want to thank him for being here. And next, I would like to thank Carrie Monahan, who I see at the opposite end of the room here, for representing Moortown Rancheria and also representing the tribal seat on the California Water Plan Advisory Committee. So thank you, Carrie, and it's always nice to see you. We get to work on a few different things together, so. And then last but not least, I would very much like to welcome Vice Chairman Robert Jeff from the Santa Rosa Tachiyokut. Apologies, I'm trying. Tribe from the Lemoore, California area, and he's joining us not only yesterday, but also this morning to offer some comments. So thank you, Vice Chairman, and I will hand the mic to you.
Oh, thank you, thank you. I just want to say hit into him. My name is Robert Jeff. I'm the current vice chairman of the Santa Rosa Tachiyokut tribe, located on the northern shores and western shores of Ba'ashi, Tulare Lake, as you guys are all aware, which is no longer with us. But today I want to thank DWR for not only allowing me to be up here to speak, but also helping our tribe in acquiring some water that we were able to purchase so that we can help better our community as well as the other communities outside of ours. But this morning, I woke up and I had this feeling in my heart that, as I sat in here yesterday and I listened to a lot of you guys speak and talk about water, the very essence of life, water. You guys heard it from tribal communities some years ago. Water is life. So as you guys sit here and you guys talk and you guys communicate and you guys work together to try to figure out California's water plan, I want you guys to think about the people, the plants, the animals. And I heard one of the staff say yesterday, take off your hat, take off that badge, and look at this plan as something that you guys know you guys got to look at holistically and think about everything. Because as tribal people, that water that ran through all these rivers and filled up all these lakes, we knew we had to protect. We had to make sure that water is going to be good enough for the people coming after us. So we never wanted it polluted. We never wanted it diverted. We wanted it to just do what Creator intended it for it to do. So now we're in the situations that we're in today because there was people that came over to this country thinking that their way of life was inferior, superior to the life that was here already. But a lot of the spiritual people that I think of, that I talk to, even our ancestors are still getting dug up from the ground today, I listen to. And I know that we were all brought here on this country for a reason. We had an opportunity from the beginning to blend our cultures, our ways of life, to make this world a better place for everybody and everything. But as we sit here today, we still have that opportunity. If we look past a lot of the things that stand in our way to say, hey, no, you know what, we just got to do what's right. Today, here in California, in America, all over this country, all over this world, we just got to do what's right. Because as a tribal person, of course, yes, I know my people need water. We don't have no water rights. Lived off the shores of the biggest freshwater lake west of the Mississippi, and we have no water rights. But I don't stand here today fighting for a water right. I just want to have a right to clean water. I want to go outside and touch it, play in it, let my kids swim in it. That's what I want for my people. I don't want to own nothing. I don't want to own land. That's not in our way. That's not in our belief. But I know today, in this world that we live in today, we got to fight for some kind of right. But all I want is that right to be able to be a part of that water again. And for the communities all around me, I live in the heart of the Central Valley where, of course, that lake was, and we got a lot of small communities, but we're one of the most underserved communities in all of California. Living right next to what was the biggest freshwater lake west of the Mississippi. We're the most underserved. And I'm going to save my public comments for later on, but I just wanted to open this up to get you guys to think about some of the things that I'm saying. Because water is life. Water needs to be on the land. Water needs to be in our body. But we need that clean water. We need open mind, open heart, open spirit, so you guys could all make that happen. And I just want to thank you guys for being a part of this committee, a tribal representative representing the tribe of Moortown and all tribes I hear her speak, thinks just like I think. But I want to thank you guys for coming together to open up your guys' mind, body, and spirits to make something happen for all the Californians. Thank you guys.
Thank you to Vice Chair Jeff for some inspiring words to really, get us started to get today. I was really struck by Frank's words yesterday, together we progress. I wrote it down. It's something I'll be thinking about as we're in our breakout groups. Next up, we have just some brief opening remarks from DWR Director Tom Gibson.
Yeah, I'm just going to sit here because will be very short, but thought I heard something or a bit of something yesterday that I just didn't want to leave to chance and wanted to be really clear about. We at the department are obviously very aware of the current challenges facing our water supply and the future water supply with climate change and everything we're experiencing. And you heard some of that in Joel's opening remarks yesterday as well, of some of these challenges. And what I wanted to be super clear about is we're not waiting for the 2033 water plan to tell us what to do about that, or even the 2028 water plan. We are working on actions now. We're working on pushing projects forward now, and we're not going to stop that. Especially in the 33 plan and beyond, we really are looking for those to give us a better basis of knowledge and granular knowledge to identify new projects, other projects, opportunities that we can then decide, okay, what's really a statewide project to do? What's a state-led project? What's a locally led project that we can support? But in the meantime, we're proceeding with the strategies and projects that we can do now because we really don't have a choice. So I wanted to make clear we're absolutely not waiting for anything to get moving because the time is now, if not past now. So we're moving forward, and we're looking really forward for the water plan to help inform our future actions, but we're moving now. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Tom. Okay, very quickly, just reviewing our agenda and key objectives. We reviewed the key objectives at the end of the day yesterday, but really we have kind of three core things we're hoping to do today. One, what goes in this water plan? That's a question many of you had, and Eric will be touching on that momentarily. We did also have some questions yesterday that we didn't get to, so we're going to spend a little bit of time answering those before we go into Eric's presentation. Then we're spending the bulk of our time today in smaller groups. As you can see here, we're going to have some breakout groups to start to discuss what are the recommendations that will go into this water plan, right? What do we know about our challenges, and how can we really define our problems clearly as we start to work through our recommendations as a group. Then we'll have a brief break, and following the break, we'll give some updates on the engagement next steps, particularly on the regional forums. I know many of you are excited to hear more about that, and the Groundwater Recharge Working Group. Then I'll preview what we'll be talking about in November, turn to our tribal comment and our public comment, and then Joel will wrap it up with some closing remarks. Again, for our folks online and in the room, we do have comment cards at the front. I have your comment cards from yesterday. If you'd like to submit a public comment today, please complete a comment card and leave it with Candace at the front desk. For individuals online, you're also welcome to submit comments to the water plan email by 5 p.m. today, and those will be included in our meeting record. And with that, I will turn it over to Eric Sy.
Good morning, everyone. So I know that we had a lot of questions and desire for discussion further on the baseline assumptions as well as the approach that I laid out yesterday. So we did want to take some time to address some of the questions that were submitted yesterday. And so we listed several here that were submitted, and I will talk through each of them. So the first question was, where can AC members and members of the public provide additional thoughts on baseline assumptions? And I guess there's really kind of two different venues, one for the public, one for the AC. For the public, we ask you to submit a comment via the email to the California Water Plan team, and we'll consider that. For AC members, I offered yesterday to hold follow-up meetings soon on baseline assumptions. And so please express your interest in a post-meeting survey after the AC meeting, and we will schedule time to discuss this within small groups then as well. All right, the next question then is how and where does water quality fit into the model and assumptions? For urban recreational demands, there's a difference in quantity versus quality of water. Example, cities with water that is unsafe. And this is a really important question in terms of this nexus with water quality and the work of kind of this mandate of SB 72, which is focused on water supply targets. And this is also feedback that we received as well, I would say, in the technical working group workshops that we held. And so I want to note that so water quality strategies that do result in a new water supply can be modeled and incorporated within the WEEP model. So projects like new water recycling, for instance, similar to projects like the pure water projects that we just visited, for instance, desalination, water treatment plant capacity expansions, to that these represent a new water supply, those can be incorporated within the WEEP model. With that said, I will note that WEEP-FS is not a water quality model, right? And therefore, likely there'll be many water quality projects that cannot be incorporated, and that's not just what the use of that is not what the use of the model is for. And so, with that said, I think we agree critically that water quality is very important to SB 72, and the work outside of WEEP-FS model may be needed then to kind of incorporate some water quality considerations into the plan itself. Next question is, WEEP-FS is using capacities from existing places like groundwater sustainability plans. How are you looking at the ability of a project to achieve that capacity? And this kind of speaks to the need to, in addition to inventorying projects, we need to kind of reconcile and normalize the project data, as well, right? There's going to be limited data within these existing plans. I think we already kind of, know that. And we're going to have to, in a way, rely on additional information that's submitted or reported, for instance, in the watershed hub. And I would note that WEEP can calculate yields then based on the reported capacities, right? So, this will involve then, some engagement then, with project proponents, on kind of reporting capacities, and then we can incorporate that within the WEEP model. And we think the watershed hub would be a medium for doing that. Next question was, okay. Next question is, when we consider the Colorado River, can we look at the management of the natural infrastructure that influences water availability in the system? And I think maybe the short answer to this is, we are not explicitly modeling the Colorado River, right? Given that it's outside of California. So since it's an imported supply that's derived from outside California, what we're doing is we're taking Colorado River imports as an input into the WEEP model. So there'll be an input into the South Coast portion of the model, as well as the Colorado River portion of the model. So I guess we're not doing explicit modeling on the Colorado River. Is a way I'd answer that. And finally, the last question here, the state has set a specific target for 2028 and have spoken about water supply reliability generally. At one point in time, either for the 2028 or 2033 plan, will water supply reliability be defined? How reliability is defined is important as we think about how we achieve the storage target. And I think what this question is kind of getting to is how do we define a water supply reliability goal as the state, right? How do we know, in a way, how do we know that we're done developing strategies, right? Until the gap is met. And so I think this is kind of maybe a spot where state kind of local planning differs from statewide planning, right? In the sense that I'm not sure there should be a single water supply reliability goal for the entire state. And so it will likely need to really vary by region, and any water supply reliability goal will need to reflect regional input as well. And so broadly speaking, water supply reliability is when supplies meet demands, but I think the question is really getting to under what conditions, right? Under dry years, under multiple dry years, under critical years, how do we define, water supply reliability? And so I would just note that within the WEEP model, we will be able to evaluate and quantify performance of strategies under a wide range of hydrological conditions. So under wet years, under dry years, under multi-year drought conditions, we will be able to do that through the model. But in terms of, our planning, though, will not be geared towards meeting a specific water reliability goal in a specific region. And just to kind of maybe take a step back, we're not, in a way, producing a master plan for every single local community in the state, with this plan. Again, the purpose of this is to really focus on, where should the state focus on investments and policies overall? And that's where kind of the work that I've described, the planning technical work, really intersects with policy recommendations, which will be the subject later today that we will talk about and will be featured within the 2028 plan as well. Okay, so with that, that kind of summarizes the questions that we received. And again, if there's more thoughts on this, After I talk about what to expect in the Water Plan 2028, we can entertain questions both on what I speak about right now, as well as any follow-on from yesterday, too. Okay, so with that said, I wanted to open up a conversation then on what will be included in the Water Plan 2028. And I spoke yesterday about our overall approach for the Water Plan 2028, as well as for Water Plan 2033. And really based on that Water Plan 2028 approach, DWR has developed a kind of a straw man table of contents or outline for the water plan. And I want to acknowledge this is a very early draft. We have not started writing any of the chapters of the plan yet. And we warmly really welcome your input and advice on any and all of this content. So and we thought it would be helpful to kind of share and discuss and outline with the AC so we can hear your ideas and be able to really align and converge around a common set of expectations for the plan. So here's the So here's the draft table of contents. It's a basic outline for Water Plan 2028. I'll go through each potential draft chapter one by one. But here it shows, again, chapter 1 would be introduction, 2 would be a description of problems, challenges, and opportunities, 3 would be a California Water Plan approach, 4 is strategies and actions, findings and recommendations, and finally implementation and looking ahead. So the first chapter would be just include background on SB 72 as well as SB 659. It would also lay out kind of the California Water Plan purpose, goals, and scope overall. Chapter 2 then would define the problems and challenges we are trying to solve. And so first, really leveraging the related studies and plans that have already been done. So we would define our problems really at the statewide level through existing plans and studies like the CMUA studies, inactions, economic costs for California's water supply challenges, and the magnitude of California's water challenges. It also could include groundwater information from Bulletin 118 and other statewide plans and studies. We also think we should really define regional problems since they vary so much by region as well. And so regional challenges, priorities, and opportunities would be informed by regional forum input. We also have a historical water use and supply data set from 1998 to 2023 that is available statewide. And this data tracks water usage, but also identifies its corresponding water supply source. And so we're conducting a trends analysis on this data for each hydrologic region to understand regional differences and understand how water use and supply vary by hydrological year type and specifically during multi-year drought conditions. I noted we also have then these preliminary water supply gaps by watershed using the WEAP-FS model in 5 hydrologic regions of the state in which we have a model for right now. And this will be the main technical analysis output for the Water Plan 2028. And we'll start to define a sound future baseline that quantifies our water supply problems. And we should also leverage other region-specific plans and studies that inform regional challenges and opportunities as well. So chapter 3 would be about the approach for the Water Plan 2028 and Water Plan 2033 since the two plans are really so interlinked. So similar to my presentation yesterday afternoon, we would describe our planning, technical, and engagement approach for both 2028 and 2033. And in the same chapter, we would discuss the progress made for Water Plan 2028 specifically. So by the time of writing of the plan, we will have invested in technical model development and application through the statewide WEAP model. We will have gathered initial planning information on strategies statewide in a statewide strategy repository. We will have established our water plan engagement forums, including all of those listed here. We will have developed actionable policy recommendations as well. And finally, we will have pilot tested the Water Plan 2033 process through an adaptation strategy test of concept, which I mentioned briefly yesterday, but we'll discuss in a little bit more detail at the end of my presentation here. So chapter 4 is strategies and actions. This would include a summary of the statewide strategy repository, including new planned projects not currently identified in existing plans. It'd feature an overview of project types and the capacities by region. There would also be a comparison of the statewide cumulative capacities to the 9 million acre foot interim target. We would also preview the Water Plan 2033 strategy development and analysis process as well. Chapter 5 would be findings and recommendations. We would base key findings on input from engagement forums, preliminary WEAP modeling, development of the strategy repository, as well as the adaptation strategy test of concept. Then policy recommendations that really define state-led actions that can be taken over the next 5 years will be a major output of the Water Plan 2028. So this is really a key deliverable on the 2028 plan that we will be heavily leaning on this AC to help advise DWR in developing. And so some asked about their role as an AC member, and this we feel is a major role that this AC, as constructed, is very adept at filling. And groundwater recharge recommendations required in SB 659 would be integrated with the broader water plan policy recommendations in this chapter too. Chapter 6 is implementation looking ahead. It would discuss the intersection of statewide and local planning. How does the work that we do in the water plan here intersect with the work that many of you are doing within your local districts and agencies? Talk about investment priorities, policy and regulatory priorities as well, next steps, and also preview of the Water Plan 2033. So just a note, it's important to remember that there isn't that much time left before the Water Plan 2028 needs to be finalized. This shows a little less than 10 to 12 months before pencils are down, before the admin draft starts to come out, and we then develop a public draft before finalization in the end of 2028 as well. Finally, I wanted to end by saying a few words about our adaptation strategies test of concept. And so yesterday I described a process for engaging regional partners on developing and evaluating strategies. And so we will be replicating that same process in all areas of the state. And so before really conducting this throughout California, we thought it would be wise to test this process in a specific area as a test of concept. And we can then take lessons learned and improve this process before applying it then to all parts of the state. And so the goal of this test of concept is to test the process for formulating and developing regional portfolios, testing and enhancing our WEAP-FS capabilities to be able to simulate specific strategies, and finally also test the effectiveness of the regional engagement process as a whole. And so this test of concept will then really test and evaluate the pros and cons of different approaches and help us to understand the limitations of the process and outputs, data gaps, and need for improvement as well. So we chose a portion of the San Joaquin Valley as our test of concept area, and so regional partners have agreed to participate, and we will be holding a kickoff meeting on this soon. Regional partners include the Water Blueprint of San Joaquin Valley, San Joaquin Valley Collaborative Action Program, the California Water Institute, Tulare Irrigation District, and Turlock Irrigation District as well. So these regional partners will, in essence, kind of serve as a mini regional forum in this test of concept. And we did consider, other areas, and the reason why we selected this area was because, it does have a wide range of current adaptation strategies. There was a nexus with, many DWR studies that we've been doing, such as the San Joaquin Basin Watershed Studies and other San Joaquin planning efforts. They've recently conducted a unified water plan, which to a scope, somewhat mirrors the scope of the water plan as a whole, and looking at really how can they increase, the water supply for kind of long-term resilience in the San Joaquin Valley. We've also developed a large inventory of projects and strategies which we could be able to use and incorporate within our inventory, as well as leverage in our technical analysis then of their strategies. As part of the water plan. And also, there were some very willing regional partners who are quite interested in collaborating on a pilot like this as well within the San Joaquin Valley. And so with that, I guess we'll open it up for any questions, again, either on the content I just presented here or on anything from yesterday as well.
All right, so if you can turn your name cards up. We were having some issues with the table mics, so I'm going to pass around the mic today. I'll start with you, Ann.
Thanks, Eric. One idea for the implementation chapter, I think it could be an opportunity to identify areas where the state could leverage public funding for projects that complement or really build off of each other. Mm-hmm. And I think that would speak to a lot of the issues people were talking about yesterday. So, for example, things like if you're looking at reservoir operations, then perhaps also downstream floodplain restoration, because we know we have constrained channels. Or if you're doing headwaters forestry work, then also doing, meadow restoration. So I think if we can at least provide enough breadcrumbs for the state to understand what integrated funding could look like, it could also be a really useful opportunity if you are able to map the projects regionally to highlight areas where, maybe certain regions are particularly primed for that kind of integrated funding. And then I think the last piece of it would be, I'd also like to see either an acknowledgement or some sort of alternative to approach if there are a particular like category of projects that are not well represented in WEEP, so that we don't
Yes.
accidentally kind of discount a whole category of
Definitely.
solutions just because the tool has limitations.
Exactly. Yeah, those are all really good points. Yeah, thank you for that comment. And yeah, that is something that I think definitely will come up with this process is that, WEEP is a certain tool that can be used for a certain kind of application, right? And there'll be many projects that are worthy of, investment, state prioritization of funding and such that WEEP cannot capture, and we just need to acknowledge that limitation of the model as well and disclaim that within the plan itself. So definitely, thank you.
Would you mind discussing a little bit further what do you envision for the regional engagement workshops, and then what is the tentative schedule for those?
Yeah. So if I go back here, so this is kind of a a little bit of the well, actually, yeah, I guess yesterday I had a little bit a larger version of this, but essentially we are so. We'll talk about this later today, actually, so maybe we can get to that. But at a high level, we're kind of leading them through this process here, right? So we'll begin with identifying some of their problems and challenges, right, and meeting with them, initially. And we plan to do regional forum meetings throughout the entire state to do that. A part of it then is also understanding their projects and strategies, right? So we will have pre-populated projects already within the watershed hub, for instance, and talking about what else could they be, what are we missing? Are there new projects that we need to formulate as well on top of what's already been identified? Because we've done our homework and tried to identify projects we've already planned so far. But then later on there'll be another meeting then on developing. Screening those projects and developing kind of these portfolios. Right? What would these portfolios look like based upon the strategies that have been identified? If we want to do that in collaboration then with the regions. And then ultimately we would come back to them with the results in the model too. I missed a step of, once we have the baseline results, we would show that to them too. So in the early going, we kind of show them, hey, this is what our model is showing, for what kind of a future 2050 would look like, given these assumptions. And that could be kind of a basis for then, planning, for new projects as well. So yeah, what I described is a series of meetings, right? So it would start, and then the one that we're talking about towards the end of this year and beginning of next would be the first one, basically. We plan to then replicate this process throughout every region throughout the state, and knowing that we're going to be able to kind of progress along this maybe first with the 5 hydrologic regions that have a model, but we're developing, expanding the model as we speak too. So as that becomes available, we'll be able to kind of progress into those other successive meetings as well, as it's available. So sorry, don't mean to give away everything for this afternoon, but that kind of gives you an overview of how really the regional forum process kind of is intertwined with our planning process overall.
I have kind of a two-part question about assumptions that are being used for kind of filling the gap once we understand where we are and how much water we need. So how are you using the information and assumptions that were incorporated into either GSPs or urban plans in terms of how much water a region will need and how much will be available? Because at least in our plan, our projections assume that we will build quite a few projects, stormwater capture, groundwater recharge projects, in order to be sustainable and resilient, but we don't have the money for those. So are you looking at these plans and assuming that we're going to build everything that we say? And if so, how do we deal with the funding gap there? And then for, especially after 2033, but let's say we assume that we are building these stormwater capture projects or whatever the infrastructure may be, or restoration projects, how are we incorporating an assumption that those supplies will be durable over time if they're relying on healthy headwaters? And how do you kind of factor in the likelihood that at least some of these headwater sources will have fire problems, water quality problems, those kinds of things, especially for the long-term planning?
Okay, great. So I think the first part of your question was about the baseline assumptions, right? And so So I do think that every local plan is going to have different baseline assumptions, right? I mean, you maybe use a different climate change than us, right? Or et cetera. All the things I talked about in terms of the key things we need to define as a baseline will be different from what we're doing versus the locals. And so, essentially, that's why we're trying to establish a consistent baseline for the entire state in some ways. I guess the second part of your question, though, was about kind of the projects, right, and the strategies, in the sense that you have plans that are planned projects. They're not implemented yet. They're not funded yet, right? And so, essentially, that would be a part of this inventory of strategies. I mean, this inventory really is of planned strategies, not ones that are implemented yet. If they've already been implemented yet, they should be really part of the baseline, honestly. So many of these, yes, projects within existing plans would be planned, and then therefore would be kind of incorporated within here, and then we would, through regional, forum engagement, again, identify a prioritized subset of them, and then develop, regional strategy portfolios, including them. And so yeah, I think that answers kind of that question. And the third one, I'm sorry, had to do with. Oh, it's right, the upper headwaters. That's right. Yes, and that has been, as we've been talking with, our Department of Conservation, CAL FIRE, within our state agency, team, that has come up, right, in terms of if we know that in the future, more fires are more likely, what does that say about our natural lands data set, right, and what we're protecting for the future? So yeah, I think that's something we need to think about and consider about how to capture, because right now, I guess we currently have in the current lands data set, it's the 2019 data set, but there's not one for 2050, right? That kind of shows, well, here's what we expect, increased fire risk would bring. So I think that is a data gap right now that I think we in order to capture that climate change effect, we are, interested in trying to incorporate, but I don't think we have a specific methodology for doing that just now.
Good morning. My question or ask for consideration is DWR's work in terms of engagement and stepping out of maybe the water community and engaging with other communities that are influential to the process. In particular, in Sacramento with CPUC, the nexus with the energy connection. I would like to ask what considerations are being made to have those conversations with the CPUC and the challenges that we're going to be facing in implementing some of these adaptation strategies. And while you're thinking on that, I would like to just give some reflection on yesterday's presentations and just some context for where this question is coming from. I think the work that the DWR staff have been doing on sharing the problem statement has been wonderful. I myself have gotten a lot more educated on the enormity of this task and figuring out what the problems are, what the history of them have been. And yesterday's remarks by Director Gibson, Deputy Director Metzger's presentation really told the story of why we're doing this. The panel on Colorado River was very educational to tell us why we have this Colorado River problem, why is it in the news. And a view I would like to share is that sharing the problem, informing the public is important and needed. And there are all parallels that DWR can draw from in saying why we do need this 10%, 9 million acre feet of new water supply reserve. Looking at the national scale, I've shared this with other AC members, we have a strategic petroleum reserve in the country, right? We hide oil in the ground, we save it there in case we need it in case of emergencies. Even though US is a net producer of oil, we still have a reserve nationally. On the electricity side, in California, we have a mechanism called resource adequacy, which is a mechanism by which California ISO requires all the utilities to procure at least 15% more capacity for power generation above and beyond what's forecasted for the year ahead. And that's a market mechanism by which producers of power, installers of hydro and gas and other generators are paid to have capacity on reserve in case we have a moment where a power plant goes down somewhere else and we have to deliver power. And there's a lot of parallels with the the regional and statewide study for water, where in California we have a statewide resource adequacy need. There's also regional resource adequacy, and there's flex, which gets a bit more technical for power, but it very much correlates to, if you want 9 million acre feet for California, we also need it regionally, in different areas with different amounts. And what I would like to share and encourage the staff to leverage these parallels, that a strategic water reserve is very much similar to electricity reserve. And so it happens, water and electricity and energy are very much connected. And how these adaptation strategies roll out, some will find water available by doing, low-cost measures that unlocks some things. It might come from regulation permitting. That's great. Some of it will have infrastructure needs. It will need funding mechanisms, and creative solutions are needed. And in every aspect of it, every molecule will need some electron to move it along, right? And there's a cost and energy intensity for that. Reference examples of some of the pure water projects that agencies are doing. Monterey 1's project is a 5 MGD pure water plant at full capacity, 7 MGD. It will more than double Monterey 1's electricity consumption, like in actual nominal kilowatt hours. All in an era where electricity costs are also going up 8, 9, 10% a year. So the energy impacts are going to be here. This is coming. The opportunity that we have as a community, DWR, is a new governor is coming in. With a new governor, there's the opportunity to appoint a new president for CPUC. And so it happens in this coming year, 2 of the CPUC seats are up for grabs, and those are nominated by the governor. And in 2030, the other 2 open up. So I think the timing of California Water Plan 2028, the elections, the challenges ahead, give us an opportunity to spread the word and engage CPUC with support for the projects ahead.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Really appreciate the outline. One of the things that we heard a little bit about yesterday was outcomes that were unexpected, or another way to say it is risks associated with different strategies. And this is not meant as a negative, but just a eyes wide open kind of a question of, as we look at different strategies and different investment opportunities or collaborations, are we thinking about potential risks that might be associated with that? Everything has a positive and a negative. And or mitigation to try to address those risks. Maybe the most illustrative is what IID mentioned yesterday about the Salton Sea. Trying to do a good thing, creating more water and transferring that, but creating a negative outcome, a risk, now in the Salton Sea. So I was just wondering if there's a way we can start capturing some of that so we can go into the execution with eyes wide open.
Yeah. I think it's an interesting comment. I think it's a little bit tough to address in the sense that, we'd have to identify the risk first to see if we've captured it within the scope of our approach right now, or if there's additional work that needs to be done on top of it to mitigate it. So, but no, I agree in, kind of in principle though that there's going to be trade-offs, right, effects on a lot of these actions. And part of the reason why we're kind of trying to do this is to take a statewide approach, right? Looking at how these actions perform together. And so yeah, I think as we identify, these trade-offs or kind of other risks or compounding effects, I think we should kind of individually address them, and either within the technical analysis that we have scoped already, or consider how we characterize that risk moving forward.
I think Paul Shipman wanted to weigh in on this as well.
Sure, yeah.
Thanks. Just wanted to clarify, this is in fact the major purpose of having the model in the first place, is identifying, all these things have composite effects. We've seen those. We've seen impacts of conservation on other things that were unintended, like groundwater recharge. And we want to be able to have an analytical framework that does incorporate those compound effects as we're looking at these. Some of these projects will have downstream effects. Some of them will have, obviously, as you recharge water that leads to less water, and then use it again leads to not recharge. As you recycle water and use it again, it leads to less water that then is sent back to the river. So that's the purpose of the model, is to try to identify those compound effects as much as possible. We may not get every effect, and there we will be trying very hard to be clear about what is captured and what isn't captured. But that is the major point of the technical modeling, is to capture exactly what you're talking about. Thanks.
Thanks, Paul. I'll leave it there. Itzel?
Hey, thank you, Eric, for the presentation, and good morning, everyone. Good to see you. I have 2 points that I want to bring up regarding sort of the outline that you presented. So under the chapter that goes over, I think it's the policies and recommendations.
Yes.
Something that I would recommend that you include in that chapter is perhaps the authority that different state agencies have to actually implement these policies and recommendations. So oftentimes organizations like technical assistance providers and the small communities that we work with, we are stuck in the middle. We are at the whims of decision-making bodies when it comes to things like projects or decisions on funding. And so I think clarifying who's doing what and kind of who's implementing what and under what authority could help clarify some of those kind of gray areas that we work with. And then similarly, another point on the overall outline, I'm curious to hear, maybe this is too early of a question for this, but I am wondering how, in particular, the policies and recommendations piece is planning to be distributed to the public. Like, are there easier, more accessible ways to disseminate this information as opposed to making people read the entire report in English in probably very technical language? So finding ways to better disseminate that to the public and to other water leaders and folks that we are expecting to do certain work or pay attention to the recommendations in particular.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, I think we definitely plan to have the product in different formats, right? So there's obviously the plan itself, maybe executive summary, there may be like a fact sheet, as well. So yeah, I think we can think about the audiences that we wanted to reach, and then kind of cater the formats to that specific audience, basically. The first part of your question then was, sorry, on the remind me again. Oh, that's right. Yes. Okay. And I think in a way, I think DWR is in a unique position, right, in the sense that we can be able to coordinate with all of you, right, as an AC, and have you advise us and give input into policy recommendations that you guys are experiencing, or based on your experience. At the same time, we have a state agency team that we're collaborating on as well, and can obviously use them as a sounding board in terms of what are the key constraints that we're dealing with, and what is the difficulty of associated with this policy or this regulation. So yeah. I think that we'll talk about the policy recommendations process kind of later today, but I do think that's going to definitely be a combination of kind of gathering input from this AC and other forums, as well as coordination with our state agency team, and developing more actionable recommendations for the plan.
Hey, good morning, Eric. Thanks for presenting all this. Things are starting. I was talking with Joel this morning. I'm a very slow person, so it's all starting to make sense. Okay. The outline adds to everything, so yeah, I don't click like that. And I second what Itzel was saying. That was part one of my kind of recommendation, is that we turn for us, we had the luxury of being a part of the reading it and being a part of the team and having access to the people that are doing this. But when I have to take this back home, I'll have to shop it around my elected officials. I need one sheet of paper.
Sure.
And it has to get their attention at the very top of the sheet. By the end of the sheet, I need to have them buy into that package. So if there's a way we can just do it in images, it's more powerful than words.
Yeah.
So hoping the document can be somewhat summarized in some key PR material that we can use. And then secondly, part of that kind of understanding. So you're going to run the WEEP model at a regional scale, collect all the strategies, run a cost analysis on those or not?
Yes.
So we'll know the cost of those strategies, roll that up to a statewide strategy that says recharge across the state, we need there's X amount of capacity at X amount of dollars. But where do we roll it higher up? Because those are the local regional projects that we need, right? But then there's the statewide system that brings the water to the regional project, right? So
Yep.
like the reservoirs, and I was talking with Karen, and we, you know, I now get we need like a watershed bucket analysis. So how much are we gonna invest in the watershed? How much are we gonna invest in our reservoirs? How much are we gonna invest in conveyance? How much are we gonna invest in the bottom? And I think the WEAP model does that, but are we gonna roll it up into is our report gonna allow us the ability that the state will invest in the statewide system so that we have the water supply to get to those regional projects?
Yeah. So I think there's a couple kind of parts of your question, right? I think, you know, part of it is somewhat kind of maybe a follow on to what Heather's and Craig's comments were yesterday, right? Which is there's these like local regional projects, but there could be some these kind of inter-regional kind of, you know, broader state backbone projects, you know, as well. And I think, yeah, you know, what kind of maybe Tom iterated, you know, today, you know, as well, is that yes, you know, that is definitely on the table, and we're interested in kind of starting that dialogue on how do we identify those. And I think the unique part of the WEAP model is that all that can be integrated within the WEAP model, right? We could be looking at, you know, these smaller local regional projects in addition to kind of the larger backbone projects, you know, as well. And in fact, we are already starting that process now, right? In terms of, you know, projects like, you know, sites or DCP or, you know, kind of, for instance, STPP adaptation strategy looked at, you know, is there potential for, you know, underground or above ground storage south of Delta, for instance, right? So there's, yeah, so yes, we can look at both kind of larger backbone as well as kind of the accumulation of these smaller local regional projects. And I think the second part of your question has to do with, well, how do you know if you have the water supply to feed those projects, right? And in a way, that's, again, I think a unique, you know, value of the WEAP model, right? Is that you may have an area where you have 10, 20 different projects, but they're all depending upon the same water source, and you only have enough water supply for one of those 20, right? And in a way, that's what the WEAP model will run the mass balance to kind of reconcile with that and say, hey, your yield is going to be 1/20th of what you maybe report of your total capacity, right? Which is why, yeah, I mean, ultimately, if you kind of, you know, think about what I said yesterday, yes, we can total up capacities, that gives you a sense of the opportunity. But the WEAP model will say, hey, what is that actual yield that you would expect, not only for average annual, but also for, you know, dry, multi-year drought conditions as well.
Good morning, everybody. I want to second a couple things I heard. Itzel gets another second, but it was on a different issue. The policy or sort of navigating the regulatory framework of the state. I think that's an opportunity for the water plan. We all said regulatory reform yesterday. That's a super loaded issue. But you could at least have something in there to make it clear what implementation looks like, where the authorities are, and sort of call to the rug the things that are going to need to be accomplished between the mosaic of different organizations we have to get through. I think it could almost, just to make it very explicit, I think there's an opportunity there, so I really like that comment. And then Ali, it's kind of interesting that it was hard for me to imagine that, you know, strategic water reserve, water's hard to store. But I do think there's a interesting opportunity there with everybody's ambitions for groundwater storage. And as Joel had said, you know, that's the savings account. The idea of a strategic water reserve underground statewide could be interesting. I think that sounds simple. It is, you know, it's groundwater storage isn't complicated, but how it's governed, you know, who owns it, how it's managed, how it's released, that is a statewide issue. I think Craig would like that. That's statewide. That's the top working downward, right? I mean, that would be interesting. Okay, now I have a question. If I can still hold the mic if you'll grab it from me. What do you see DWR's role? How do you see that distinguished for the bigger statewide projects versus more local projects, watersheds and that kind of thing? And the reason I ask is, I don't think we get out of this. I don't think the state is going to be successful without it being all in. I just don't think there's enough big unicorns out there to add up to the number we are all hoping to add up to. And I think you're going to have local projects. Mm-hmm. What's DWR's role in that versus DWR's role in the strategic water reserve or something like that? So I don't know if you can opine on that a little bit.
There's a, you know,
I'll spare Eric a second here. I think my initial reaction is in all instances, it's a partnership. The question is whether, from everybody's perspective, this is better as a state-led thing, so we're leading, but we're doing it in partnership with you, versus this is really a regional project, a regional control issue. You all are leading, and we're being supportive there. So that's just as a general thing. You know, I don't really want to do this, but I'd be sort of curious what the range of opinions is on how much you really want state control of this versus like the state partnership and assistance in implementing the projects that really truly can and should be regional, but just making sure that the state is doing the big things we need to do from the state perch in order to help facilitate the regional project, so hopefully they ultimately work together. So I think both involves all of us, just a different question of who's leading and who's supporting. I don't want 40 answers, but I'll take one.
Our folks online can't hear you.
If the state of California and DWR are relying on a local project for success of their goals with the water plan, then I think it's prudent for DWR to assist in success. And that's not asking for money, by the way. It could be, but it isn't about money. It's just about overall success of the project. I don't think anybody wants their local project controlled by DWR. It's a local project and should stay that way. But if DWR's success is relying on a local agency's success, then I think DWR should facilitate that success. That would be how I'd answer that.
Good morning. So I'm going to pull on a couple threads and then get to a question. So yesterday at the field trip, it struck me as we're kind of going through how that water is being cleaned that, boy, this is really a man-made wetland is what we're making here, you know, between anaerobic digestion to essentially plastic roots, right, that are pulling off TMDLs and everything. You know, all of that was just kind of fascinating to me. And then we get in here and have a PowerPoint presentation, and every slide, the background was the mountains, and most of that is public land, national forest. Good job, Joel. And you know, and so and what struck me about that is that we're trying to answer questions that might have a different answer and a different approach. And then I get to my question, which is when you go to the demonstration slide that you had there. So I look at that map, and then I look at the left side, and I don't see any of the Headwaters partners on that regional partnership side. And that's where that water comes from, it originates from. And then you tag on to the question about RCRC and wildfires yesterday, and that does impact. It doesn't just impact the quality and the quantity, it also impacts the storage. You know, the sedimentation post, Dixie post, you name the fire, and that's real and that's there. And so my question is are we going to engage those Headwaters partners in the demonstrations and then throughout?
Yeah, so I'll acknowledge that, you know, this is a somewhat focus group, you could think of, right? We did want to keep it to a somewhat smaller group as to essentially work as our guinea pigs, right? I mean, we're going to test this process out that we've never done, nobody's ever done before in the past, because we want to learn about it from, you know, before we do it throughout the state. And with that said, I do think that, you know, organizations like, for instance, San Joaquin Valley CAP, right, or the Blueprint have, you know, very wide constituencies and very, you know, large partners within kind of their collective efforts that whose voices I think can be brought, you know, to this discussion overall. But essentially, yes, you know, we have a process that we're going to test out, and you know, we thought kind of having them serve as this kind of mini regional forum in a way, you know, would be helpful. Now, with that said, the actual regional forums will be public, right, and we will be kind of broad in our engagement, you know, in the real thing, basically, right? So So yeah, I think overall, again, we selected a small group kind of just for this test of concept, but when we actually do it, throughout the state, participation will be public and encouraged broadly.
There goes the federal government, just making everything tougher for us, I swear. Just kidding. My question is about expectations, but first I want to go back to the conversation between Director Gibson and Tony. All projects, I believe, are local, even ones that are managed and initiated by the state. They have local impacts, they provide for local jobs, they affect the local communities. But even the projects that are initiated by lesser agencies, the state has the power to either be an impediment or an accelerator. And so, without direct control, I think that's obviously important that the state is either on board to bless those projects and or says, no, that does not meet our goals.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and I just sort of want to reiterate, part of the partnership concept I have is getting at that we want to do projects in coordination and partnership with the locals, and also recognize that we have probably as a state various roles to play in terms of helping facilitate the projects, or occasionally getting in the way, but hopefully being helpful to facilitate those local projects. So that's why, whether it's nominally our project or your project, both of us are involved and need to be helping each other.
Absolutely, which then gets to my question, which is around expectations for this committee for this plan. Yesterday we saw the graphic that showed 2028 California all one color, 9 million acre feet, and then 2023 California was this mosaic of regions and projects, et cetera. And so obviously there's different milestones or markers in this process of the 2028 plan, the 2023 plan, and the 2050 targets. I'm curious as to what granular detail are we looking for as a part of this process? Is it more broad brush policy principles and projects that will inform decisions that then will be used as proof of concept that we're going to meet those targets and be refined along the way? Or are we getting down to we should focus on this project and not that project? So what layer of detail?
So let me be clear on this. We are not endorsing individual, local, regional projects through this process, right? So, and that kind of gets to my comment of that, we're not developing like this, local master plan for every single community throughout the state, right? I mean, the intent of all this planning technical analysis is to be able to inform, kind of state, investment and priorities, right? And it's to feed into, basically there should be a nexus between the planning work that we're doing, that I just described, and the policy recommendations that will also be developed at the end of the plan, right? And it may identify kind of, broad, project type categories, and we need to do much more forecast informed reservoir operations, and here's a general area where we see the most opportunity. There's a long line of groundwater recharge projects that need to be implemented, and we've identified this many within the San Joaquin Valley and the Central Valley as a whole, or et cetera, right? So recommendations on kind of a broad statewide policy level, we will, yes, look at if we put in the model, you will evaluate, individual strategies and projects, but the conclusions that we're going to draw from that aren't that, here is the performance of project X. We're more interested in, as a statewide plan, looking at, okay, with these range of this regional alternative and this regional alternative and this regional alternative, what is that performance? What does that tell us then about state investment overall and policies? That's kind of the focus of the work.
Okay, good morning. I just want to say thank you for such an amazing conversation and a great way to start today. I think there were a lot of questions brewing, so I really appreciate the opportunity to have dialogue and hear everyone's perspectives. A couple questions I have is, we're talking about a lot of different projects and types of projects, groundwater, infrastructure, reservoirs, and we need all of that. But I think each one of those is going to have different timing, and I'm wondering how the plan's going to address when to do what and how to do it at scale. So we need to move multiple scales forward at the same time, and that's going to take a different kind of planning at different levels. I'm just kind of curious how you're going to integrate that into the plan and decide how to prioritize the timing of the plan. And then my second question is, we're really all focused, I know we're all infrastructure people, we come from that background, but I'm starting to hear more and more talk, as we should be talking, about natural infrastructure, headwaters, water's coming in and out of natural systems throughout the state, right? It doesn't stay in a controlled conveyance at all times. And we have headwaters at different spatial scales as well. So it's not just, the upper level headwaters. We have local headwaters as well that need to be managed. How are we incorporating management of the natural infrastructure with, our built infrastructure?
I think Paul has a quick response, and then we'll turn to you, Eric.
Thank you very much. Yes, absolutely. Headwaters and natural infrastructure are critically important. We are working on technical bases with which to analyze these things. I will say that technical bases are difficult to find for some of these projects that we want to do, but we may not have a basis for them. We've looked at forest restoration, and we're developing a technical basis for that. One thing we're struggling with, because we know it has benefits, but we're struggling to get a technical basis around it, is meadow restoration, and there's benefits associated with it. And we are looking at a variety of other projects. I will also acknowledge that the California Resources Board is developing a model, a statewide model also that is going to help us a lot with the upper watersheds. We're working with them on what they can provide out of that model to us. It'll be very valuable to us. Our model is more systems operations model, while their model is more of an upper watershed model. And so we're hoping to have much more detailed information we can share in the future. But right now that's still developing, just because these areas are quite complicated, and the research is not as developed as it is in, say, the developed water system, where there's a lot of data to pull from.
And I could also touch upon then I think the timing question, and I'll acknowledge that so if a project is planned for implementation in 2030, we're not distinguishing that from a project that's planned for implementation in 2035, right? I mean, we're defining this, our future planning horizon of 2050, because that's what the 2030 plan, requires. And then, looking at combinations of strategies and evaluating that within the WEAP model. So with that said, I think the kind of the phasing that you're talking about, that could be incorporated then in the kind of implementation section that it's shown on here, right? In terms of after you've kind of identified, done that analysis and said, okay, yes, here's state priorities. We really need to invest in this type of thing and that type of thing, right? And here are some of our near-term priorities, and here are some of our longer-term priorities, right? So you could be kind of phasing that out, I think, in kind of a more broadly in the implementation section, but we are not kind of distinguishing, I guess, individual projects, based upon their unique planning, I guess, planned implementation time.
Okay, unfortunately, that's all the time that we have, but I see, Brian, you have a question, and you have a question, and Natalie as well. If you could summarize your question on the sticky note around you or near you, or we'll find you one if you can't find one. We do really want to make sure, and we heard you loud and clear, we really want more time for this kind of discussion. This is really what informs the DWR team, and hearing these perspectives and suggestions. So it's definitely something we're taking to heart for future meetings. So the three of you, if you can, we'd love to capture those. And with that, please join me in thanking Eric Tsai. All right, and next up, what we've been talking about for the last 2 days, the water plan recommendations, how we're framing them, where we're headed. And we have Henry DeBay, Division of Planning Manager from DWR.
Great. Thank you, Emily. Good morning, everybody. So my name is Henry DeBay. I'm the manager of the Division of Planning at DWR, and I'm the new guy. I was not at AC1. I've been in this role for a whopping 2 months, so it makes sense that I'm the one presenting the most important part of the plan, the recommendations. Okay, so joking aside, we're really excited to share with you all our initial thinking about how we're thinking about developing recommendations, essentially the action items for Water Plan 2028. And so the goals of this presentation are really twofold. One is to get your initial feedback on this thinking, and two, to hopefully provide some context for the small group discussions that are going to follow. So why are we talking about recommendations in the first place? So in short, SB 72 requires us to do so. So the statute reads, "The department shall conduct a study to determine the amount of additional water needed to meet the state's future water needs and to recommend programs, policies, and facilities to meet those needs." And so for our purposes, we're treating the combination of programs and policies and facilities as strategies. And as Eric noted, and as others, all of you have pointed out, we're ramping up a lot of the analytical and modeling work, so that's the study part of this language. But we won't have all of that technical and analytical work completed for Water Plan 2028. So for that reason, we're really relying on input from this group to develop recommendations. And like Director Gibson said, we're not waiting for Water Plan 2033. And so the good thing is a lot of you already have some pretty strong opinions about what needs to be done, so that'll be helpful. Okay, so this slide summarizes feedback that we've heard from all of you about the water plan. And I'm sharing it on screen because I think it's a useful North Star for the development of recommendations. So 3 recurring themes that we've heard from this group are: you want credible quantification, so better data, consistent baselines, clear assumptions, basically, show me the data and how you got there. And I think the approach that Eric presented really speaks to this first one. Second, folks also want projects and strategies that are feasible and fundable, things that can actually be implemented and make sense for ratepayers. Third, you want the state to lead and to convene on this, to set bold goals to help align systems. So I think those last 2 are especially relevant to the setting of recommendations. Okay, so what could success look like for recommendations in the water plan? So these are by no means perfect or exhaustive, but as a starting point, we think the recommendations should first and foremost be responsive to Senate Bill 72. We also don't want to reinvent the wheel. We want to build on existing work, whether that's the hotter dryer strategy, previous water plans, and the work that many of you are already doing. We want it to reflect broad input from across California. We also want the water plan and its recommendations to drive executive branch water policy, ideally with a mix of these near and long-term actions. So Lisa, to your point earlier about timing, we want both of those. And we also want opportunities for early wins between plans 2028 and 2033. And ultimately, we really want recommendations to catalyze action at both the state level and the regional and local level, as was being discussed earlier. So one other thing to add that's not on this slide, but Itzel, your point earlier, we want recommendations that are accessible and easy to understand. So I think that's an important consideration too. So anyway, this is our initial picture of success. Okay, so the next question is, where should we actually focus our attention? And fortunately, we're not starting from scratch, and what you see here is our initial synthesis of the focus areas that have really been emerging through conversations with you all yesterday, before that from other groups. And so a few themes are coming through pretty consistently. So one is affordability, funding, financing. Another one is regulations, data and infrastructure. On the infrastructure front, in particular, we've heard about both built infrastructure as well as natural infrastructure in the respective roles of the state, the federal government, and regions. And we've also heard considerations that cut across these focus areas. So things like tribal interests, equity, watershed resilience, multi-benefit initiatives. So those may not necessarily be standalone focus areas, but I think they could inform and transcend these focus areas. And again, this isn't meant to be exhaustive. It's our initial synthesis of what's rising to the top, and we want to keep testing these and refining these with you all. At the same time, we want to start getting underneath these broad areas and really understand, what are the actual problems or opportunities that we're trying to address. Okay, and so that's what this slide lays out. This is the structure of the process that we're proposing for developing recommendations. So an important point here is we're not jumping straight from a broad topic like affordability or infrastructure to a recommendation. We've got some way stations along the way. So step one, identifying the key focus areas. Where should we focus our efforts? Step two is developing findings. So within those focus areas, what are the actual problems, the barriers, the gaps, the opportunities that we need to address? So we're calling those our shared findings. Step three is identifying the policy goal. So given the finding, what are we actually trying to achieve? So this helps establish the outcome that we're working towards before we identify the specific actions or recommendations. Step four is about developing recommendations. So given the finding, given the policy goal, what should we actually do about it? And then step five is about refining and prioritizing those recommendations as we get more specific about what implementation would require. So the basic idea is that we're proposing is focus areas, findings, policy goals, recommendations, refinement. So we're trying to be really deliberate about that sequence so that the recommendations are ultimately responsive to the problems and the goals that we've identified. Okay, so here's how that process maps onto the advisory committee. Yesterday and today really focus on the first two steps. So we'll continue workshopping the findings after this meeting. And importantly, those findings will really give us a basis for identifying policy goals, what we're actually trying to achieve within each focus area. And then at AC Advisory Committee 3, Advisory Committee 4, we'll shift towards developing and refining recommendations. And then ultimately, the idea is to bring a refined set of recommendations to the statewide plenary in mid-2027. So we're not asking you to solve everything today, but we're really building the foundation that the recommendations will ultimately come from. Whoops. Laser. Okay, so one other important point is the advisory committee is not doing this in isolation. The same process is being informed by the state agency team, by the tribal advisory committee, by regional forums and others. And the arrows here are really intentional. We want those perspectives feeding into the process throughout, not simply reacting to recommendations at the end. So DWR's job is to bring all of these perspectives together and really look for areas of commonality, of tension, of opportunity. So ultimately, the recommendation should reflect a much broader conversation than what's happening in one given meeting or venue. Okay, so one other piece I want to introduce before we get into today's discussion. So these are some proposed parameters or guardrails, if you will, that we think should serve as a lens throughout the entire recommendation development process. In other words, these aren't criteria that we apply, at step 4 of the process. As we go through the process, we want to keep coming back to 5 pretty basic questions. So, what are we focused on? Why does it matter? Who has a role? How could we act? And when can we get started? So in terms of scope, the what, are we focused on issues that fit the scope of this water plan with an emphasis on water supply, but recognizing the nexus with ecosystems, flood, wildfire, equity, and other outcomes. Relevance, the why, so are we focused on the things that matter most to meeting the charge in Senate Bill 72? Responsibility, the who, somebody had a comment about that earlier. Who has a role in addressing the issue, and importantly, what is the state's role? Implementation, the how. So is there a credible pathway to action, considering things like authority? Again, Itzel, you were a few steps ahead of us. And as well as cost and funding and permitting and other constraints. And then time frame, the when. So are we ultimately identifying actions that can at least be initiated within 5 years of Water Plan 2028? So again, the idea is that we don't need to answer all of these questions today, but we think it would be useful to keep coming back to this as we move through the process. And again, these are proposed parameters. We want your input on whether these are the right lenses to carry with us, or whether we're missing something important. And with that, I'll turn it back to Emily.
All right, thank you, Henry. So now we will be transitioning into 4 breakout groups for each of these 4 areas. You'll see there's one group in the back focused on regulations, one here in the front on data, and then there'll be 2 in the middle, one on infrastructure and one on affordability. We have about 45 minutes in our breakout groups together. For our folks joining online, we will be meeting in breakout groups, so we'll have kind of a pause on the slide deck here, but we'll be bringing you all back around 10:45, so that you'll have the chance to hear what each of the groups discussed. Before we begin, I also want to share that members of the public are welcome to join and observe the discussion. So if you don't see enough chairs there, you're welcome to stand or grab a chair from the outside to sit and observe the group. And then we are going to ask for an AC reporter again. So we'll let you nominate who in your group might be the best to report out. And we have 3 core questions. Okay. Well, I hope you all enjoyed that kind of initial conversation on some of these topics. I know in our group on affordability, it was really making us rethink how we're even thinking about this topic, which we really appreciate the group's discussion. So we're going to go around. There should be a nominated reporter for each group. I heard in regulations it's Cora, so there is a mic. Or data, okay. So we'll have you kick things off, kind of summarizing 2 to 3 takeaways from your group's discussion.
If I have 6, is that allowed?
We'll allow it.
Okay, we're going to run through, I think, 6 priorities that we identified on the data side. I will try to be quick, and I will emphasize that we thought about this in the context of these being data needs that are statewide, that we feel like the state would be the right actor to play an important role in making these happen. So the 6 are, 1 would be a California Weather Service. Really need to improve our weather forecasting, not only for FERO, but also for emergency management, flood control, water supply across the board. And then our national weather system was really it's not well suited to California-specific hydrology and atmospheric rivers, and a need for better data there. Number 2 was tribal water rights data and data sovereignty, and recognition that we don't have accurate data on tribal water rights, and how are we then going to incorporate that into decision making. Number 3 was data to evaluate nature-based solutions as part of our water infrastructure, with the example of meadow restoration, and how do we have the right data that we can evaluate how those interact with our gray infrastructure, and an emphasis on bringing in tribal ecological knowledge into that conversation. Number 4 was stream flow data to inform ecosystem water needs. Number 5 was around streamlining data definitions and reporting. Number 6 was data on domestic wells, things like location, age, and whether they're failing or not.
Excellent, thank you. Yeah, really aligns with a lot of the things that I think we've been hearing from some of our internal conversations with other DWR divisions in terms of some of those priorities. Thank you, Cora. All right, next up, I'm gonna go to you, Carrie, to summarize our affordability discussion.
Thanks, everybody. We had an amazing conversation, and I'm going to do my best to give you the tip of the iceberg, but we went pretty deep on this. Affordability is a huge concept, and it precludes a lot of good work from going forward. And so we need a reset on what affordability means. And water, as we heard this morning, is life. So what does it mean when we can't afford to invest in a secure, reliable water resource that benefits people and the environment for generations to come? So in other words, if we quantified the cost of not doing what was required, it would be absolutely untenable. So in order to get this message across, we talked about an affordability philosophy. that is needed, a conversation that's needed, a reset of what the definition of affordability means based on 3 priorities. So we can't advocate for new money to do I point to you, Craig, to do new water infrastructure projects unless we've met our 3 top priorities first. So the first investment in our affordability philosophy really has to go to watershed health. And if we're going to have healthy watersheds, we need to invest in them and maximize nature's resilience. The second is meeting the human need, the human right to water. And that was a great conversation about helping small DAC communities get the biggest bang for the buck. In other words, a small investment there goes a long way, but it's absolutely untenable to have people in California not have access to clean, healthy, safe drinking water. So we need targeted programs that meet rural community needs, meet DAC needs, meet tribal needs. These are core values. And then the third core value is that we need to take care of the infrastructure we already have before we start talking about building new things. That's an investment that was made by previous generations, and whether the reservoirs are filling up with sedimentation or we have flumes and canals that are deteriorating, investing in this thing we only have one word for called maintenance, but really could be seen as stewardship of infrastructure and stewardship of watersheds needs to happen first. So our affordability conversation was about resetting the concept of what we're doing here and creating a new narrative and making sure that people felt like or understood that those 3 core priorities were met first. We did start to talk a little bit about how we might fund future projects, which was maybe the intent of the group in the facilitator's mind of like, how are we going to do this? So I'll share a little bit about that too. One was perhaps a tax credit program for industry to be able to pay for some of these core principles. So a way to have a long-term steady flow of funding that comes, and thinking about the flow of money for the flow of water rather than buckets and siloing. So keeping an abundance mindset and not getting stuck in scarcity mindset and simply filling up buckets that, buckets tip over, they leak, we don't need to be talking about buckets. We need to be talking about long-term flow. Sustainability. So creating that long-term. And then we talked about polluter pay models, which are unpopular but extremely logical, and some other creative pieces. So thank you.
Thank you, Carrie. I heard, Alice, you were the reporter here for infrastructure.
Yes, give it up for infrastructure. We all love infrastructure. So our group was infrastructure, but I do want to mention we found ourselves talking a lot about affordability and about regulations, because obviously these things are always connected. When we were talking about infrastructure, we made sure we were talking about both built infrastructure and natural infrastructure, so things like wetlands, floodplains, upper watersheds, forest health. Some of our key takeaways were, when we're talking about infrastructure, and again, this is both built and natural, we need to start with maintaining what we have. A lot of us have aging infrastructure. A lot of us have CIPs that are capital improvement programs that are already pretty large, just because we're trying to build and maintain infrastructure that in some cases was built 100 years ago, and that constrains our capacity. That also means in some cases we're losing efficiency. And it's maybe less popular than investing in, everybody wants to be there at a ribbon cutting for a new facility. Nobody necessarily wants to be out there when there's a main break in the street, even though I think that's pretty cool to fix. So just making sure that we are focusing on, starting with just rehabilitation of what we have. And then when we're starting to think about developing new projects, making sure that they're implementable, and that gets into some of the regulatory issues, the permitting processes that can take a long time, and then just issues of sort of rate capacity, right? Can our customers and our citizens actually afford these projects? And then again, thinking about the maintenance. And again, that goes for natural as well as built infrastructure. And then we had a really interesting discussion too about the concept of beneficiary pays, and what that means, particularly when you're talking about some of these natural infrastructure projects, because sometimes, as a water agency, you might be on the hook to do a floodplain restoration project or something that has kind of broader benefits. So just kind of thinking about that model. And then we had some good discussions about things that the state could do to support in terms of not just funding, although obviously that's a piece of it, but in terms of making the regulatory process easier, doing more education and outreach on water in general, and then on some specific areas like potable reuse. So it was a really good conversation. I don't know if I missed anything, but.
Thank you, Alice.
Am I the last one? Okay. So for the regulatory, what do we call it? Regulations group, I'm reporting out on that. We had a really good conversation. It was actually got pretty in depth in certain areas. Started talking a little bit about, okay, here we go. Yeah, we started talking about the proposed approach. Had some questions about, at what point do we have these conversations about the policy priorities? Where's that coming in the phasing of the discussion? We haven't done that yet, but that seems pretty critical to actually start wrapping our heads around what we want to consider when we're talking about regulations and the need there. Also, we talked about how should we bucket the different categories of regulatory action, and had a conversation about, or at least touched on, whether or not we're actually talking about something greater than regulations, which is something like administrative actions, because when people hear regulation, they often think like, oh, it's the water board. But there's so much more, and not all of them are regulatory agencies, but the actions of the administrative agencies have some sort of effect that is like that. So we were thinking like, maybe you broaden that out. I don't know, it's the planning team's choice, but just a comment. We talked about also how, we're living in this place now where it's not just the infrastructure that's not suited to a changing climate, it's the regulations as well. And so that's kind of the driver. What is driving us for this? That's what it is. So, not only, again, do we have to optimize how we operate the infrastructure, but how do we optimize the regulations to be more agile and flexible in the future? And in that process, we talked a little bit about how, regulations are not, they're not structural in nature, but they sometimes run into the same problems that you would find if you were trying to implement infrastructure in terms of infighting with various different interests and water user groups and that sort of thing. And there have been plenty of examples of that recently when it comes to like groundwater recharge, regulatory reform, permitting reform, proposals, and that the water plan update could actually be an opportunity to reveal some of the risks and opportunities when you're talking about regulations and how to change them, because it's a place where we can push the buttons and see, what is really the risk to one water need or one like water user or what have you from doing some of these things that people get nervous about, even though it's just a change and kind of like a change in how we do business. We talked about some of the things that we thought needed to be part of the discussion. Executive orders. Where do executive orders fall when it comes to the regulatory space and water? Water rates. Should that be its own category of things, or is that part of this? I think we kind of landed on, it's going to be a big part of the discussion, but it could suck the air out of the room. So, we need to be very, very, maybe not careful is the right word, but thoughtful as we move forward when we're talking about how to deal with water rates. What do we actually mean by that? Everyone in the group could have had a different interpretation when we say about we need to do something about water rights. Well, what does that mean? How do we handle it, when it comes to tribal water rights and what the board and others are already doing there? We also talked about is there a way to get regulations to incentivize good behavior rather than somehow burdening good behavior with a few pointed examples. And then obviously, and this is just part of a standard planning process, right? For any sort of regulatory change we would recommend or we would suggest or consider, we have to be very, very clear about who is the agency that is doing that and how do you get them to sort of participate that or have some buy-in or be part of the development process. So we talked about a lot of those types of things, and we have a lot of notes on those boards that I can't even get to all of them. So anyway, that was the gist of it. I don't know if there's anybody else in that group who wanted to add to it, but yeah.
Thank you, Alex. Yeah, we'll be taking pictures of all these flip charts and working to summarize this in the meeting materials. We also had some DWR note-taking support in the breakout group. So there's a lot of rich information here. I know we got the question in our group. How are we going to continue this conversation? It's definitely something that the DWR team is thinking about, and something in our post-meeting survey we'll be talking a lot more about, and how to keep this conversation going as we start to really flesh out these findings. So we are a little behind schedule. But before we go to our break really quickly, each group was given a little Mentimeter, though I hear through the grapevine that the infrastructure group may not have gotten to their Mentimeter. So Bill, you're Vanna White over there. In your break, if you have a minute to come scan the Mentimeter if you are in the infrastructure group, we'd love to hear from you. If we can switch to the Mentimeters now. So we asked this kind of what are the major challenges you want to see addressed within each focus area. If we can go to the first one. Okay. And did we get? Yeah. Okay. So regulations will also do a postmortem. Your QR code is in the on the wall over there. So we'll track that. Looks like we have one person, improving the ability of water rights system to account for flood flows, which I think aligns, Alex, what you were kind of summarizing, though that even the interpretation of what to do about water rights has many different perspectives. Okay, let's flip to the next one. Okay, so this is on data, fragmented data reporting, stream flow data. So a lot of, I think, Cora, looks like you did a good job summarizing most of what your group shared. Building streamlined systems, consistent definitions, weather forecasting, tribal data. Yeah, I know that's something that the Tribal Advisory Committee will be a kind of emerging conversation about tribal water demand and how to even go about approaching that in the context of the water plan. Okay, let's go to affordability, if we can. Since infrastructure didn't get to do theirs, can we go to the next one? All right. So last one here, cost of inaction. I think that's the first pillar of this philosophy as we were talking about. Steady funding streams, right? So instead of thinking about just buckets, thinking about our streams of money and kind of rethinking how we even approach talking about affordability. And then, yeah, there were kind of several side conversations about small systems and underrepresented communities, as well as O&M, which I think we heard from Anne during the first meeting. It's really, really easy to find money for new projects. It's really, really hard to find money for operations and maintenance, and that's kind of a continued through line here. Okay, let's jump back to the slides, if we can. So we're at 11:12 right now, which we are behind schedule. Let's reconvene at 11:20, and we will work to kind of truncate the back end of our schedule. I do want to say before we wrap that Director Gibson and Lead Deputy Director Cindy Messer are heading out. And I just want to say I really appreciate you both being here and really engaging in this conversation. I think I could see that it was really meaningful to this committee, so really appreciate your time and participation in today. Okay. In the essence of time here, we are running a little bit behind schedule. So we're going to start with my colleague, Megan Snow. Many of you have talked with her since our last meeting. She is leading our regional forum planning and strategy and rollout. So she's here to give an update on regional forums, where we're at and where we are headed. And then we'll have Stephen Springhorn from Sustainable Groundwater Management Office give an update on our groundwater recharge working group, which is kind of our two key priorities over the next few months.
All right, great. Thank you, Emily, for that introduction. As Emily mentioned, I've had the chance to meet many of you and speak with some of you, but for those who don't know me, I'm Megan Snow. I work for Stantec, and I'll be leading the regional forums process of the water plan. And I started my career 20 years ago at DWR in the Public Information Office, where I worked to do public facilitation and note-taking for the Lake Oroville FERC relicensing process. And part of my boss's strategy with having me in that role was because I was a local face. I grew up in Oroville, and my dad was one of the major voices in the community at those meetings. And so what I really learned through that process and that I'm bringing to the regional forums is the importance of listening to community members, the importance of educating people on the moves that you're making, and also the ability to have productive conversations. So that's the mindset I'm bringing into this. But to kind of give you an overview of where the regional forums fit in the overall engagement process for the water plan. So you guys are here at the AC committee, and then we also have the California Water Commission where people can engage on this, the state agency team that's been mentioned a couple times, and then the regional forums where that's really DWR's opportunity to get place-based feedback and information in alignment with SB 72. And Stephen will be talking shortly about some of the other engagement pathways, one of which being the groundwater recharge management group. So the regional forums, the overarching purpose is really for DWR to come out into the community, tell the bigger water story, talk about the bigger challenges that the state is facing for its water future, and why this plan is important. We'll be talking about SB 72, we'll be talking about some of the other components of the water plan, and also setting the strategy, the roadmap for 2028 and 2033. Our big goal is to create broad awareness of the water plan, but even more so is to listen and learn from the communities about regional challenges, how you're prioritizing solutions, and how you're adapting to the local water future. So we have the map here. You've seen this map so many times now, the 10 hydrologic regions. We're aiming to have 1 to 2 in-person meetings in each of those regions. But before we embark on that process, I wanted to lay out a little bit of the larger strategy for the regional forums, and Eric touched on this a little bit during his presentation. But we're going to kick it off with a virtual forum, and that's where we'll be setting a lot of the foundational education about the water plan, giving kind of the state of California's water, how we are developing the water plan, the roadmap for the 2028 plan and the 2033 plan, and just giving an opportunity to have that foundational education online and available for people to reference in the future as well. So it'll be recorded and then posted on DWR's site. And then we will transition. Those virtual forums will also give us an opportunity to plug these in-person regional forums. And so the virtual forum, I am happy to announce that it will take place on October 6th. We will be providing more information on that soon, but we will start the process of developing all the materials for that. Then we'll move into the regional roadshows, and those will occur between November and April of next year. We are, I'll talk more about the regional forum, the in-person regional forums shortly, but as I mentioned, that's our opportunity to listen and learn from the communities. And then we'll have the statewide plenary where all of those groups in that butterfly will all come together and have greater discussions about solutions and prioritization of solutions. And then we're not done. We will come back to the regions through additional regional forums. Probably some of them will be in a hybrid environment or in a virtual environment, just to give more people an opportunity to join the conversation. So I've been thinking a lot about how do we make these regional forums really valuable, not only to DWR, but also to the communities. And while I can't take the same approach that my boss took of hiring a bunch of local people to be my interns, I can look to the folks in this room who have the local expertise and the regional knowledge of the the dynamics. And so I have been having conversations with several of you about what a regional forum would look like in some of these hydrologic regions, and I'd love to have more conversations as we start to shape them. I've also been speaking with DWR's regional managers and getting their input on other events that they've been doing and what made those successful. And I've been having feedback through informal conversations with folks too. And the big learnings that I've taken away from that is that local engagement in the development of those regional forums is incredibly important to creating a collaborative environment and trust in the plan's development. And so that comes in many forms of having, people involved in the development to featuring local people in the actual forum as speakers or potentially a panel of local experts. And then also giving attendees an opportunity to prepare for these regional forums. So not only are they going to receive some level of education on the plan and have an opportunity to provide input, but they come knowing what questions we're going to ask, what materials they might want to bring, or what information would be helpful through this information gathering process. And so my conversations are also helping to shape the format of these meetings. So we've heard short presentations are definitely necessary. So we don't want to come and talk at people for 2 hours. We'll have some short presentations mixed with opportunities for engagement and discussion. We've heard a lot that getting all these people in the room is a rare opportunity for them as it is for us. And so giving people an opportunity to share learnings, share ideas, and brainstorm is going to be a really necessary component of making these regional forums successful. As I mentioned, we'll give time to local voices, either through panels or speaking opportunities. It's important to have those local faces and representation within the communities up on the stage. The content that we'll be developing for the presentations, for the short presentations, will be tailored to the local regions, and we will address kind of local water dynamics. It will also cover those frequently asked questions that keep coming up about the 9 million acre feet, about how the water plan integrates other local water plans. So we'll make sure that we're ready to address those questions in the room. And then, as I mentioned before, we really want to create space for conversations and ideas. And so our vision for these regional forums is that we will have, we'll spend about 3 hours in each location, and we envision probably 50 to 100 people in the room, including local elected officials, water practitioners, community-based organizations, NGOs, and the public is invited, of course, to attend these as well. We really want to get a nice, diverse group of people at the table talking about local water challenges, solutions, and how to prioritize those solutions. What success looks like is that people walk away feeling like they've been heard and that they've been able to contribute to the process. And from DWR's standpoint, we want to be able to walk away kind of understanding, having insight on local projects and solutions, and also making connections with people out in each region who we can bounce ideas off of, who can serve as like a small brain trust that can help us kind of make sure that we're course correcting or on the right path as we move through the development of the water plan. And so, as I mentioned, we're aiming to have 1 to 2 meetings in each of the hydrologic regions. I know that's not enough. These hydrologic regions are huge, so we're trying to be mindful of where we can kind of create nice little pockets for people to travel into and not make the commute too unbearable. So these are our current locations that we're considering. We have not decided, we have not put kind of the final line on any of these. So I'd love to hear from you all if these are the right locations, or if we need to shift and change some of them. So we're very much in the development process right now. Welcome to feedback, and I look forward to working with all of you on this. The success of the regional forums is really going to be dependent on the support of you all in helping us get invitations in the right hands, to making people aware that these meetings will be taking place in the region. So I will be reaching out to several of you, and I look forward to working with you all.
Thank you, Megan. We do actually have a little bit of time for questions, because we have fewer public comments than anticipated, so we can shift things around a little bit. So I think the kind of first call to action is, if you haven't already talked to Megan, I know some of you raised your hand, and we were kind of prioritizing the near-term meetings that we think will come in end of 2026. So if you haven't yet talked to Megan, but you are interested in engaging on a regional forum in your area, please come talk to her after the meeting. Otherwise, we can take a few questions, which I see one here from Shane.
Thank you, Emily. Thank you, Megan. What's the thinking about somebody from one region going to another region's conversation? I ask the question because I've always found that extremely helpful, to really listen and hear what's happening in that region.
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I think with the location of some of these, we might get some crossover between regions. And I think while our goal is to really hear about the region-specific issues, challenges, and solutions, I think having diverse perspectives, because as we all know, water doesn't just stay in one of these hydrologic regions, it kind of moves through. And so building that understanding of how all the different components are going to work together is going to be necessary. So I think while the goal is to get some of these regional specific ideas, I think that there is room for crossover.
Okay, thanks. We're happy to help you with organize the South Coast
Great.
meetings, working with the member agencies and our other partners.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions? All right. I see here you, Etzel, and then I'll come to you, Levi.
All right, thank you, Megan, for this information. I have, I guess, more of a clarifying question. So I want to make sure I'm understanding this right. Is the intended audience for these regional forums essentially people that get paid to work in the water sector? And the reason I ask is because I think based on the previous slides, right, it's going to be held during the workday for 3 hours, and it will be held, you know, like only in English in certain locations. And so I just want to clarify and be sure here. The point is to get input from essentially folks that work in this sector and would be able to be compensated for their time, not necessarily the general public.
So these meetings are open to the general public, and we would love to have their participation in this. I think as we're developing the water plan, we are looking for insight into the challenges and the solutions that will help inform the plan. We're also considering other opportunities to have the public be able to engage in this process. I know that the workday is not ideal for the public to come, and so we're considering how other avenues for them to be able to participate in this and kind of be able to participate and provide input without having to come to the regional forum. And as Eric mentioned, this is just kind of the first of multiple opportunities, and I think some of the future opportunities, while this one is planned to be in person, we are planning some other virtual opportunities so people can engage that way.
It looks like, Joel, you wanted to add something?
I just think it's a great flag, and I'd like to talk with you offline on how we could have a virtual option that's as accessible as possible, that anyone could watch at any time, and then also think about when we are going across the state, how can we make sure that it's accessible and at a time when folks could be there. We don't want to limit the feedback that we get to just a certain group. That's not our intent.
Thanks, Megan, for the presentation. Just a couple observations. It feels a little top-down, so maybe just some thoughts. You might want to consider having an AC member present with DWR to kind of demonstrate the intent to have broad representation from sectors. And then also maybe on the vision, if there is an intent to not just have folks feel heard, but be heard, and if there's a commitment from DWR to consider feedback and insights into the plan, that might be a powerful message as well to consider at those forums.
Yeah, that's great feedback, Levi. Thank you. And part of the structure of these regional forums will be to have local voices be part of the actual presentation. We've been tossing around some ideas of either having a keynote from a local expert or to have a panel talk about challenges and solutions. And then I think when we have these facilitated roundtables, we'll also be able to get that feedback from the public and be able to kind of take those ideas back and be able to review them more closely.
Yeah, I guess, so this is great, and it's exciting, and I'm looking forward to it. Just in looking at this map, I'm going to tee off something a little bit that, from just a previous comment here, but I would consider travel time for some of these places. Like, I'm looking at the North Coast, and that is, real Northern California is very big, and the roads are windy, and you don't get anywhere fast. Driving from Ukiah to Wairika is like driving from Sacramento to Los Angeles. So just something to, I know you're not trying to accommodate everybody in every possible way, but there may be some of these locations where physically it covers such a large area, and actual, you know, transportation is so slow that you might need to have more than one in those locations, just because it takes 5 hours to get from one place to another. Or for those locations, like, maybe do it later in the day, like in the afternoon slot, so people have more of an opportunity to you know, make it like a, just manage their travel a little differently. But yeah, I mean, that's a really big area, and I don't know if the Sierra North Lahontan, like, I don't know where these lines kind of end and begin, but yeah, that area in general, I just want to flag as like a challenging one for transportation. Yeah.
You are so right, and we are also planning to do these from November through April, which is the depth of winter and an El Nino year, and we're not quite sure what that's going to look like. So we're also considering, okay, what does Plan B look like if the weather gets too intense? We certainly don't want people to be in unsafe situations trying to get to the regional forum. So we will be considering Plan Bs, and yeah, these distances are massive between the regional forums, so definitely trying to think through how to get the best distribution of the meetings and kind of try to get the most people to the table that we can.
Okay. I think that is it for questions. So again, please follow up with Megan if you have other ideas or want to kind of engage on your region in particular. And thank you, Megan. And we'll welcome Stephen Springhorn.
All right, thank you, Emily. Good almost afternoon, everyone. My name is Stephen Springhorn. I work in our Sustainable Groundwater Management Office in Sacramento and DWR, and I'm here to present the latest on our groundwater recharge efforts and the formation and launch of our groundwater recharge working group. I did want to acknowledge my co-leads here, Jose Alarcon and Mark Nordberg, who are working hard on this effort as well as the rest of our groundwater team in our regional offices and headquarters, because we are truly trying to bring the groundwater info to the water plan. As Joel mentioned yesterday, it's so important that we have both our strategic supply savings account, as mentioned earlier, fully integrated and connected across the state with our surface water. So Today, I'll be providing an overview of 659, Senate Bill 659, just a quick recap there. Talk about the formation and a little bit more detail on the working group itself, and then talk about how to stay engaged in this effort or get engaged in the recharge effort. As we all know, the Super El Nino is coming, as Megan just mentioned, and we're not sure how that's going to hit, but we want to be prepared and recharge ready for it. And then we'll have a fourth topic related to this, and my colleague Laura Hollander from Division of Flood Management, our Deputy Director of that effort, will be speaking on the connection of the work they're doing in the flood world with what we're doing on recharge as well. All right. So a quick recap on Senate Bill 659. So this came about after the massive floods of the Tulare Lake Basin, as you can see in the picture here, that had a lot of impact to the local region, and a lot of action was happening on the ground by hundreds of local agencies with support from regional entities and state entities. And out of that came the Water Supply Solutions Act of 2023. It really had the goal to integrate recharge fully into this 2028 water plan and subsequent water plans, which is exciting from the groundwater perspective and needed. And it really has this dual purpose of directing us, DWR, to work with all of you and others across the state to identify those immediate opportunities. So let's be thinking recharge readiness for the individual season that we're about to get into. That could be pretty active. And then also at the same time, that longer arc of the long-term solutions. So how do we, as we're learning by doing each season, integrating that into the longer-term solutions and improving our overall ability to recharge. And then we're also required to have actionable recommendations. So again, this is not an exercise to plan and just have things sit on the shelf. This is really meant to be actionable. We have to hear what's has been going on, what has been working, the challenges, the barriers, and then how do we get through those to then action on the ground. Because it is a huge opportunity, and we know that flood water is a massive opportunity. It's a huge risk. So this recharge effort and actions is a way to minimize flood risk in a little way, and then maximize the opportunity to use our natural infrastructure, our groundwater basins. And so we're going to be doing that by a couple different ways. So looking at recharge potential, water availability to recharge in different areas across the state, looking at the legal, regulatory, and financial opportunities and barriers, which we know there's quite a few of those, and for good reason. And so we have to understand that balance of trying to promote action while having a responsible action taking place within the context of the current laws and regs, or how those would change through these recommendations or other reasons. And then also looking at the fundamentals of where's better places to recharge, best practices, and then again, getting to implementation. All right, so this was mentioned at the last AC meeting, but wanted to hit on it again because Senate Bill 659 defines recharge very broadly. So it's a big scope, it's a big ask, but we also understand it's a big opportunity, and it's exciting to be talking about recharge in Southern California, where it's one of the world-leading areas in an urban landscape that has been doing recharge for decades. And so I think that's what we need to understand. We need to build off the work that's been done in Southern California, where you're truly integrating recharge to the water portfolios and into your operations. So that's just what we do mentality versus how do we do this? And so there are a lot of other places in the state that we're working with where it is that where they don't know what to do, or it's very complicated. And so we're trying to share from one area to the other, and the scope is big. And it includes all these different types of water that we're talking about: raw water, treated, recycled. We got a great tour of the recycled water, the Pure Water facility, which was excellent. And then the different ways to put that water into the ground or leave it in the ground, which is a form of recharge if you think about it, in lieu recharge. And that's also demand management. So we have aquifer storage and recovery, and different injection wells, surface spreading, field flooding, so flood mar type of activities, stormwater capture, which happens a lot down here, and flood managed basins as well. So when you look at all those different methods of recharge, you can make a case that all of these elements of the 9 million acre feet in SB 72, there is a linkage. And we're making that case, and in this graphic, it's sort of showing that every one of these elements that we're working very hard collectively on the water plan, recharge is right in the middle of that, and groundwater is as well. And Joel touched on this yesterday. So what we're doing to really integrate recharge and make sure that it's understood how to do it in a responsible and effective way, is we are trying to, again, understand where and how much can be done, understand the barriers and incentives for more action, identify where it is working, so best practices, how to do more of it, and then what benefits come from it. And not just single purpose benefits of water supply, but also some of these other benefits that might be more non-traditional, of thinking about how this recharge helps groundwater-dependent ecosystems, interconnected surface water, base flow in times where you really need it in critical and dry years. So this is all the area, the space that we're working through in this effort and with the working group. And it really, as the key point here, is it's supportive of the 9 million acre feet and what we'll get to in the 2033 plan. All right, Megan mentioned this already, so now we're getting into how we're going to be engaging. So Megan mentioned the broad landscape of engagement. We have connections to this body. We have a couple AC members that are part of this recharge working group that I'll talk about next. And it's also linking into some of these other, the technical working group and other areas where recharge is coming up. So that's where the recharge working group sort of falls within the overall landscape of engagement. And then really the purpose and role of the working group itself, as mentioned, it's to inform these recharge recommendations that we're developing and putting into the water plan. We had some great discussions in our regulatory breakout of what that means on the regulation side and the recommendations of the overall water plan. So these recharge recommendations can really build momentum into the overall recommendations, and we would like to see them in the recommendations of the water plan so that more attention, funding, permitting, that kind of thing can come to work in the recharge space. So again, we want to have this working group share what is working, collect those lessons learned, as almost importantly, or more importantly, what is not working, to understand those challenges and what solutions we have to those challenges. And then really integrating this with Senate Bill 659 or 72, as I mentioned, and SGMA, because the success of SGMA is riding on the success of this water plan and future water plans, just like the success of the water plan is riding on the success of SGMA. It's intricately linked, as mentioned, that Eric and Joel mentioned on yesterday. So what is the composition of the working group? We've identified 34 members ranging from many different local and regional water agencies and districts. Some of those include AC members. And then we have more regional and statewide representation of water organizations. So these dots are the different local districts, but then there would be many halos around the Sacramento Valley, like with NACWA and Aqua and other entities. Tribal representation is there. And so we do have this broad category of expertise, knowledge, place-based knowledge, which is important for recharge because it's so site-specific. And that collection of members has expertise in all defined methods of recharge that are identified in 659. So we have the geographic scope and scale, but also the expertise of how to do it in these different types of recharge, which is important. Okay, so what we're doing and where we're heading to launch this working group. So the first group is going to be this big, big event, big kickoff, where it's a bigger group. So it's going to include this recharge working group, but it's also going to include the state agency team. We're inviting any of you that are interested on the AC, the tribal advisory committee, interested members of the technical working group, key state and federal agency staff. And why we want to start big is that, getting back to, we want to understand what's already happening so that we're not duplicating efforts, we're not blind to the fact there's a lot of other things going on. We want to build off of what's already going on. So that first meeting, October 1, what better way to start the new water year is to really get into an overview of what we're doing, identify those recharge challenges, and then really turn the microphone over to the group to get a lot of feedback in breakout sessions of what is working, what existing studies have been done, what recommendations are already out there. So then we're going to go into meetings, a cadence of meetings 2 and 3 through the winter and the spring of the groundwater working group, churning through some of the information we've heard in meeting 1 and information we're providing as DWR from what we've been hearing and compiling in this Senate Bill 659 Recharge Recommendations Report, that we're looking at all different information and sources to bring it together to inform the recommendations. And then we're going to come together again in meeting 4 next summer time frame along near the plenary session of the water plan to then highlight what has been done, what has been identified in draft form, and then that would feed into the draft of the California Water Plan. And throughout all of this, we have been coordinating closely with our state agency family and different federal agencies, and we will continue to do that through this effort because we know that recharge is not a single agency type of activity. It requires a lot of permits or multiple input from different state agencies, whether it's technical assistance, support, permits, funding, you name it. So we are making sure that we're shoulder to shoulder with our state and federal agency partners, as well as the Tribal Advisory Committee. So just wrapping up here, how to get involved. Many of you are very involved and really appreciate that, and leaders in the recharge space. So we're really asking you to stay involved, please. Share as much as you can. And the number one thing going into a potential super El Nino is let's be recharge ready. So first and foremost, let's be ready for the moment that in these hot, dry days that we have left until a potential wet winter, let's be ready as we can. And then let's take action, because those actions are right in the 659 mandate. We have to have it actionable. So what better way to do that by showing what works in these big moments? And we don't know how many floods we're going to have left or water in the system we'll have left in the Sigma timeline, so we have to capitalize them. And then the second thing is participate in meeting 1. We encourage you to participate October 1. Save the date, it's going to be going out soon. And then there's some more near-term connection points to recharge-related activities. Our team is working on a recharge readiness webinar series. It actually kicks off tomorrow. Our team is going to be talking about site selection and recharge potential and some of the data and new mapping that's been going on there. And that will go all the way through next calendar year. We also have the FloodMar network that's been a long-standing leader in this space and convener of recharge information. September 17th, there's going to be a virtual workshop on the connection of recharge and FloodMar to the water plan. So there'll be a deep dive on that. And then we'll have our continuation of our flood diversion and recharge enhancement work, where we've been partnering directly with local agencies across the state, providing targeted support and assistance and piloting different things like renting temporary pumps, purchasing temporary pumps, pipelines, building temporary recharge basins. And so that all came out of the 2023 Tulare Lake flood event. So we are learning. It's small scale, but we're trying to learn so we can scale that up. And if you have any further questions, please reach out to me, as well as we have our recharge@water.ca.gov. So with that, thanks for your attention on that, and look forward to working with you all. And I want to turn it over to Laura to talk about the flood plan nexus. Thank you.
Hi there. Thanks, everyone. I'm Laura Hollander, Deputy Director of Flood Management and Dam Safety. And it's been a privilege to be here and listen to all the discussions. And I constantly am thinking back, 'cause it's my role, is to think back and think about how these discussions fit into flood management. And it's in a lot of different ways. So I just wanted to highlight a couple of areas that my team can be helpful for the water plan going forward. I'm already working with Joel, and I've been working with the Sigma team. So I just wanted to highlight a couple things and directly related. Actually, can we go back to the previous slide? Oh, do I have it? Okay. How do I? Oh. Okay. So my team is directly involved in some of these efforts, including the Flood Diversion and Recharge Enhancement Group. And we are able to provide technical expertise in what is a flood flow when we have flooding situations. How can we help local agencies in their declaration that it is flooding time and their flood flows that are ready to be recharged. So my team is actively working to help with that. We have a lot of technical assistance capabilities in that space. We're also really interested and do a lot of work in forecast informed reservoir operations, FIRO and FIRO-MAR, how we can bring those strategies together. So we have some technical expertise that we can use to assist with those efforts as well. And then also wanted to share that my team is responsible for a lot of the forecasting, both for public safety and for water supply. We produce the Bulletin 120 that a lot of folks rely on. So if you want to talk about forecasting, I have folks that could really be useful in that situation. We also are part of the California Nevada River Forecast Center, which is key. I heard the recommendation around a national or California National Weather or just Weather Service. So I really want to kind of delve into some of those discussions because we're really looking to improve our forecasting capabilities. And we're doing that, some of that in partnership. I see Marty Ralph back there with the Center for Western Water and Weather Extremes to really improve forecasting. So just wanted to highlight some of those areas where my team can be helpful. And thank you for the discussion.
Thank you, Laura. All right, we are unfortunately a little short on time to get you all out of here and back on the road for some of you. But Stephen couldn't let you all leave without a quick word cloud about Recharge to kind of tee up the October 1st launch. So if we can go to the Mentimeter. Last Mentimeters of the day, or actually there's one more. Second to last Mentimeter of the day. So we're asking you all, hopefully, if you could summarize your most important recharge recommendation within the character limits that Mentimeter gives you, 1 to 2 words, what would your recommendations be? Maybe we can bring this to the first recharge working group.
Yes, we'll bring this there and back to the team. And it could be Joel for president, or I mean,
Should
actually,
not be Joel
president.
for president.
Yeah, or governor.
Yeah, he's moving up.
Infrastructure. Yep, that's an important one.
Protect water quality, maintenance.
Yeah, water quality, and that, yeah, there's a lot of effort going on trying to understand the benefits and impacts of water quality as recharge is water is put out on the landscape. Multi-benefits is getting bigger. Lots of interest there and lots of opportunity there. Community benefits, maintenance, smoother approvals connected to regulatory clarity. Yeah, that's definitely an area we're going to be working through and have been. Permitting reform, environmental flows. All right, well, thank you very much. Yeah, we'll take this back and look forward to working with you all as we embark on this exciting effort.
Thank you,
Brett?
Stephen. Okay, if we can switch back to the slides here. Oh, that's the laser. Okay. So we've already been teeing up some of the things that we'll be talking about at the next advisory committee meeting. But before we do that, we do want to make sure you have it all on your radar. The toolkit that should have come out, did come out, in August to 163 different organizations that have connected with DWR or signed up for this toolkit. It's really an opportunity for regular input on user-friendly, layperson-friendly communications tools. So there's some social media tools. There's a digital article that came with this first toolkit, as well as a summary of all of the fact sheets that we have now out on the streets. And you can find the toolkit yourself under the resources tab. So we've done a little revamp of our website, and we'll continue to update, particularly as a lot of these regional forums or other public-facing meetings comes out. The shape of our website is going to adapt. So we'll try to keep you informed about when those updates are happening. And we do expect these toolkits to come out in somewhat of a cadence with the AC meetings as we develop these materials and handouts and kind of further our discussions as a group. So just wanted to make sure you all were aware of this toolkit launch and how to find it. And then our next advisory committee meeting is November 4th and 5th, the day after the election, which will be really an interesting place to be together. We are still working with Aaron to confirm the location. We have two really great options that we're just trying to finalize the details. We are also considering an optional water tour, but really curious to hear this group's feedback about how we structure the tour and how we might want to shift things to make sure we have adequate time for discussion. So at our next meeting, we're going to be doing a lot more of this small breakout group type discussion. We're hoping to spend roughly about half of our time doing this kind of workshopping, deeper dive on the water plan findings and recommendations. And then we'll have made some good progress on this test of concept that Eric was sharing about, kind of launching that test of concept, where we are, what we're learning about the tool capabilities, and as well as the regional forums and kind of where we're at after our initial kickoff of the regional forums with the virtual launch in October. So with that, very quickly before we head to public comment, we've got one last Mentimeter, if we can switch back. And we'd love to hear from you all. What are you most looking forward to for the next meeting? Time for big group discussion. Okay. That's helpful. Focus on solutions, okay. Hopefully we don't see coffee, coffee, coffee. I think we have solved that one. Okay, +1 for time for big group discussion. So kind of around the you or around the group, kind of hearing from everyone, being able to hear. Another tour, okay, that's good feedback. More time to collaborate. Planning team progress and initial feedback from regional forums, great. Understanding how our feedback is being incorporated. Another well-facilitated meeting, thank you. And thank you to you all for your engagement throughout these 2 days. Hearing from local San Joaquin Valley stakeholders. I bet Aaron's excited to hear that. I know that's high on his mind as we're thinking about the tour. Is there a way to scroll down? Seeing results summarized from today's meeting, absolutely. Yeah, so one of the things that's high on our priorities is to get out a post-meeting survey pretty soon and kind of gauge level of interest in continuing some of these conversations that we've had, particularly today. So please be on the lookout from that from me in the next few days. Clearer vision for 2028, fleshing out potential portfolio examples. Okay. All right. Well, in the interest of time, we will switch back to the slides, but really appreciate this kind of feedback. Again, also myself and Eric as kind of the two advisory committee leads, we're here. If you want to email us, give us a call, right? We really want to make this a productive time for you all and make it as useful as possible. We can go back to the slides. All right. So we do have a few comments here. So if you are someone who submitted a public comment card, I'm going to ask you now to come up front here to one of these chairs. Yep, everyone. And per our guidance on tribal and public comment, we will begin with anyone who is designated as a tribal member or delegated tribal representative, which we are excited to have Vice Chair Robert Jeff here back with us. So we'll actually do our public comment from the podium. And for our public commenters, you do have 3 minutes to provide your comment. There is a timer down here on the floor, so you'll get a sense of how much time you have remaining. And as a reminder, these are public comments for the committee itself to receive. These comments are summarized as part of our meeting summaries, in addition to the comments that we receive from folks online. And for our folks online, you do have until the end of the day to submit your comments to the water plan email, cwpcom at water.ca.gov. So with that, we'll start with you, Vice Chair. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, everybody. My name is Robert Jeff. I am speaking today on behalf of the Santa Rosa Rancheria Apache Yokuts tribe, a federally recognized tribe located in the San Joaquin Valley and originally on the western and northern shores of Tulare Lake. I want to give credit to our Tribal Historic Preservation Office for putting this comment together for me and doing all the great work that they do. For those of you who don't know my tribe, our people lived with and depended upon the Tulare Lake, its rivers, tule marshes, plants, fish, wildlife, and surrounding lands for thousands of years. For our tribe, Tulare Lake is more than a place where flood water occasionally returns. Water in a lake is not flood water. It is a lake. And to us, it is a remnant from the creation of our basket world, the Central Valley. It is part of our cultural landscape. It is a part of who we are. Restoring even a portion of the lake would begin restoring an ecological and cultural relationship that has been profoundly disrupted for more than 150 years. Today, we ask that the California Water Plan 2028 evaluate the partial restoration of Tulare Lake as a tribal, environmental, groundwater saving, flood management, and water storage strategy. But this plan is not only about restoring the past. Tulare Lake can help California prepare for its water future. California is preparing for a hotter, drier climate, reduced snowpack, groundwater overdraft, continued subsidence, and increasingly extreme cycles of drought and flood. Our culture was made under the conditions California is now beginning to plan for. At the same time, SB 72 directs California to identify 9 million acre-feet of additional water supply, conservation, and water storage capacity by 2040. We believe Tulare Lake deserves to be evaluated as part of that solution. Why spend billions of dollars to create new reservoirs and lakes when the largest lake west of the Mississippi sits dry due to water diversions and abandonment of California's public trust responsibility? During exceptionally wet years, legally available high flows, instead of being directed to the ocean through the James Bypass, could potentially be directed into a managed portion of the historic lake bed for beneficial use. Instead of treating such water only as flood emergency, California should ask, can we store it? Can we recharge the aquifer with it? Can we help it with our region with SGMA? Can we restore habitat with it? And can we help to restore a tribal cultural landscape along with the tribal heritage? A partially restored lake could function as natural water infrastructure, providing emergency flood storage while allowing water to freely exchange the state water project, working in unison with the San Luis Reservoir. can I please finish up with this? I know my time ran out, but that means one project could potentially advance flood protection, SIGMA implementation, agricultural resilience, ecosystem restoration, tribal cultural restoration, and California's SB 72 water storage goals. We are therefore asking DWR to do 3 things. First, include partial Tulare Lake restoration among the strategies evaluated in California's water plan. Second, quantify its potential surface storage potential for in lieu water transfers and reduction in groundwater overdraft and subsidence, and determine whether those benefits can contribute towards the SB 72 target. Third, establish government-to-government consultation with culturally affiliated tribes to evaluate a tribal-led Tulare Lake feasibility study. California does not have to choose between water supply, agriculture, groundwater, sustainability, ecosystems, and tribal cultural resources. At Pa'ashi, we have an opportunity to address them together. Our Mutual Lake has always been part of California's water system. Perhaps it's time we begin planning for it to be part of California's water future as well. Thank you all.
Thank you, Vice Chair. All right, next up, a round of applause. Next up, we are transitioning then to public comment. So we have Charlie Wilson, who will be up next, and then Charlie will be followed by Femi.
Well, good afternoon. I see I'm standing in your way of a nice hot drive home, so I should try to be brief. I'm Charlie Wilson. I represent the Southern California Water Coalition. We're an education nonprofit based here in Southern California, from roughly Kern County to the north to the Mexican border and out to the state line. So in Joel's heat map, we represent more than half of the state's population. I want to speak directly, even if it comes across to this group as Captain Obvious, but I want to speak directly to the reality that we are facing. Nature is not waiting on our decision-making process. Our historic water system is outdated, overstressed, and driving towards critical collapse. And unless this water plan confronts that head-on, California is not going to meet the 2040 reliability needs. This plan cannot be another document that simply describes the problem. It has to urgently drive to the most cost-efficient, technologically available, and deliverable water supply adjustments that we can possibly make, and we should have started yesterday. In short, our existing system, we are out of time. By way of, as we heard from Eric earlier today, DWR's own studies show the truth in large portions of the San Joaquin Valley are in water supply constrained, even with existing infrastructure and contracted supplies. This is not a theoretical concern. This is a system failing in real time. We need DWR to break down those constraints and quantify their actual impact. Then we need accountability. What reliability are these requirements costing, and what measurable environmental outcomes are they actually producing? If better science, forecasting, monitoring, habitat improvements, technology, or adaptive management can maintain environmental performance while increasing reliability, the plan should clearly state so. For new projects, again, a system designed for stalemate cannot deliver 2040 reliability. So let's be honest with ourselves. We have built a permit system designed for stalemate. We can identify in this room all kinds of projects, but none of it matters if those projects cannot get through permitting and construction in time. Sites Reservoir provided a really good example on both sides of that equation, where yes, environmental review can be streamlined without weakening performance or protections. But the rest of the permitting system still forces projects to sequentially be duplicative and is very slow moving, often resulting in additional requirements that become very costly and may not produce any result. We need reforms. I can list those out in more specific terms in follow-up comments that we will make. But without these reforms, we're not going to get where we need to go. So I'm asking for today some real accountability to be put into the water plan. We're asking DWR to include a regulatory and operational constraints assessment. We need to answer 2 questions. How much additional reliability is locked in the existing system? And what must change specifically to make new projects deliverable in 2040? Water planning is easy. I say that with a smile. Delivering water is much harder. and nature is not waiting. We should all be challenged by the same sense of urgency. California must reform a system that has been designed for stalemate and replace it with one designated for delivery. We look forward to working collectively to bring that sense of urgency and helping all of you with a new water plan. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Femi, you'll be up next, and then Megan, you'll be following.
All right. Good afternoon, and it's a pleasure to be here and to speak with you, the committee members. My name is Femi Ashidele. Until recently, I led a team of meteorologists, hydrologists, and computer scientists in implementing a global flash flood guidance program in partnership with the United Nations World Meteorological Organization, although I'm here today in my personal capacity, and to speak about something that is akin to borrowing a leaf from Ali, making some parallels to a previous part of my life where I did some work in what's regarded as a performance-based regulatory framework for radioactive waste disposal. The concept, if you can bear with me and just imagine this picture, you have radioactive waste, stick it in the ground, provide a series of containments, and rely on the natural system to delay and attenuate the potential radiological exposure to a certain population downstream. So there's a reliance on several barriers, as it were, for claiming credit to meet a certain numerical standard. The parallel here is there's a numerical standard in a sense, your 9 million acre feet, and there is a multiple barrier or a multiple component system in terms of the petals on the flower, the eight strategies. So the question is, where do you claim credits? Which of these strategies would give you the largest claim for credit in meeting the 9 million acre feet of additional new water sources required? I'm heading to a point where we're talking about performance, a performance-based framework, which Eric in some ways mentioned in his presentation, where he talked about performance. And so the question is, which of these systems or components give you the biggest credit towards 9 million acre feet? The WIP model gives us a tool, I think, and a very good tool for doing this multi-system, multi-components assessment. But I want to urge the board, the department, DWR, and the advisory committee to make the WIP FS model not only a performance-based planning tool, but also the basis for a future post-implementation performance confirmation. Hence, the model becomes a part of what you continue to do, not just now in the planning stage, but as you walk towards implementation, and continuously asking the question, which components of this flower and how are they performing in terms of giving us credit towards the 9 million acre feet target. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Remy.
Hello, thank you for the opportunity to comment. I just want to start by commending the advisory committee this afternoon and the DWR for the incredible past 2 days. I'm Megan Murphy. I'm the Senior Regulatory Advocate with the California Municipal Utilities Association, or CMUA, and we were a co-sponsor for SB 72 and commissioned the research for identifying the gap in 9 million acre feet as well as the economic impact of non-action. So we're thrilled to see SB 72 being implemented, and California did make history by establishing a statewide water supply target, but now we must make history again by achieving it. So we really hope to see an actionable plan with projects and strategies that identify the full 9 million acre feet to build more reliable, affordable, and resilient water future for California. We do have a few requests, and the first being that DWR be a leader in envisioning statewide solutions and that they play a supportive role in local projects as needed and work with their federal partners to secure additional state funding. I know that's a big task, but it's really, really needed for statewide reliable funding going forward. And finally, I'll just remark that it does seem like there's quite a bit of interest to go into the technical details. So I do think a separate conversation about some of the assumptions in the model and those technical details should be covered in a separate forum. So thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, our last public comment will be Marty Ralph.
Thank you. It's been great being here. Marty Ralph, I'm a meteorologist. I'm at UC San Diego Scripps Oceanography. Big fan of your community. We depend on you. I'm trying to bring meteorology to focus more on water, and I just want to share a quick update on FIRO, which I've been a leading developer of, and then make a couple recommendations and maybe a final last quick remark. Our FIRO pilot studies are really progressing well. Our first, Lake Mendocino at Sonoma County, has achieved a water control manual update formally adopted by the Corps of Engineers. And it's really the beginning of a wave of those that will be emerging in the coming years. The Army Corps executive briefed us at the FIRO workshop a couple weeks ago, and he directed the Army Corps of Engineers to fully pursue FIRO. I think he even used more colorful language than that, but it was very important briefing for our entire community on FIRO. We had over 150 people at the meeting, really big milestone. We've completed an initial study of roughly 20 dams across California for which there's potential for FIRO to be helpful. And I've been asked the following question for more than a decade. How much water availability enhancement is possible if FIRO really goes forward across the state as much as it's viable? We have our first answer, and it's in a published paper, and it is 300,000 to 500,000 acre feet per year on average, depending on wet or dry years. That is using no new concrete. That is not, it's using science and technology and modern engineering information to help manage reservoirs more flexibly. And hence the recommendation that came up in the data group about making sure the forecasting is really moving forward as part of the California Water Plan. And this amount increases the better the forecasts are. The more lead time we have to see the storms coming and the inflow to the reservoirs, the more time there is to adjust and maybe keep more water after the storm, knowing you've got plenty of time to release it before the next storm comes. So the more we invest in making those forecasts, and they're really atmospheric river forecasts that matter here, better, the more benefits there's likely to be towards the Colorado Plan's 9 million acre feet goal. Quick recommendations: pursue FIRO expansion statewide where it's viable. Use state-of-the-art forecasting to maximize FIRO benefits. Establish a California Weather, Water, and Climate Service built on demonstrations of tailored capabilities already in place. Extend forecast lead times for atmospheric rivers, et cetera. And for context, I want to add that all major countries in the world have their own version of a national weather service. Not just the three that have bigger economies than California. Dozens and dozens of others that don't have nearly at stake what we do have their own dedicated capabilities. That is because weather varies from place to place. California has a more variable annual precipitation by far than any place else in the country. And look at this incredible economy, fourth in the world if it were its own nation. It's warranted, I believe, for the California Water Plan to consider recommending and making happen a permanent long-term capability to support specific forecasting requirements that California's economy depends on for water management in particular. And then the last thing I want to do will take about a minute, if you're okay. This was a reflection I had prior. I'd used as my
30 seconds.
30 seconds. Opening remarks at the FIRO workshop I wrote that morning. I've stood where two key rivers meet, the Yampa and the Green, in a deep canyon in far northwest Colorado, where Powell once camped 160 years ago. There I reflected on where we are now. From the era of discovery and settlement to the era of dam building and growth, rapid growth, 80 years each, we now face the 21st century. FIRO is part of this new era. We are the headwaters of change, gathering together not by the force of gravity, but by the necessity to adapt, with the energy of common purpose. Science, engineering, and policy are our tools. Our diversity of perspectives and expertise is our strength. Our common goals extend beyond and above our personal roles or agencies' missions. It is the reality that by working together with colleagues and, yes, friends, old and new, we can make change happen. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. So to round us out, we have Deputy Director Joel Metzger.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am
so pleased with how the last 2 days went. I appreciate all of your time. I appreciate your enthusiasm. I appreciate your perspective and your expertise. And on behalf of Director Gibson and Lead Deputy Cindy Messer, we all thank you for making this investment in this process. And I want you to know and reaffirm how committed DWR is to this process. You see our executive team here. You don't just see the planning team, you see flood, you see groundwater. All of us are invested in this process, and we intend to do everything we can to make it a success. And we're going to hold ourselves to a high standard all along the way. And I also want to just let you know that as you are talking out there in your communities, if there are red flags that come up from your board, from your constituents, anything, please let us know. We want to know if we are making missteps, if we are miscommunicating. We want to correct those. We want to have those conversations, keep the relationship strong. We want this to be a process that is known for its integrity and transparency. And if any of you don't feel that, I want to know about it personally. And I think about this as a grassroots effort, and that takes all of you talking about it. So please share photos of being here on social media, talk about it at your board, talk to your friends and your colleagues. We want people to be aware of this and want to engage with this process. Be an ambassador. That's part of your role at the AC. In going forward, I'll leave you with this. This is meaningful work, and I'll challenge you all to think about someone, a loved one, who's going to be here after you are, and think about what kind of a California you want to create for them. Maybe think about a place that you cherish, an ecosystem or a river or a mountain, and think about how this process is going to preserve that or make that reliable or still make that special for the people who will be here after us. I think about my family and my kids and what kind of California they're going to live in, and that's very meaningful to me, and I hope that you all can think about that and think about the human piece of this. And finally, I know that this seems tough and maybe potentially insurmountable, but it's not. We have the solutions in front of us. I believe we have the right people in this room to solve these problems. I believe we are going to solve these problems, and I'm excited to do that with all of you. And finally, I just want to thank my team, Eric, Henry, Emily with Stantec, all of the facilitation team in Stantec, all the other folks who have put so much work into coming together today to provide this to all of you. We could not do this without all of you. It takes a huge effort, and I'm so appreciative and honored to work with you all. So thank you for your time, and we've got this. Take care.